Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Uh, we're delighted that you're able to join us by Zoom, to be certain. Um, about every year since 1941's inception of this North Carolina Society of Historians, there's been an award ceremony that's been held, with the exception of one particular, and that was during World War II, and we simply didn't have one then, and actually, technically, last year. This particular program was supposed to have occurred back in November, as most of you know, but we ran into some issues uh, um, under the auspices of COVID, pretty much more than anything else, and we had to cancel. So generally, this particular meeting today will take the place of the one that should have occurred in 2020, and we'll also meet again in the fall. I promise you that we will. The North Carolina Society of Historians, since its inception, has always been devoted to the not only preservation but the promulgation of history and historic events pertaining to North Carolina. Some of those are pretty, some of them are not so much. And some of you have captured some of those pretty moments in your entries, and some of you have captured those that were more challenging and not so pretty in nature. That's just the way history is. But before I signed on, I had a friend of mine who actually is a fellow Burke County and a classmate of mine from Drexel High School, Debbie Halliburton, who posted something on Facebook that I just happened to see that I think is apropos here. As we look at history itself, let's not look at the meme said, let's not look back in anger or forward in fear, but around in awareness. Let us not look back in anger or forward in fear, but around in awareness. And you have helped create that awareness. And we're going to look all around in awareness that you've been able to create for us and submit to this society, give us the opportunity to honor you. Now, I will say quickly that we have no refreshments to serve up to you. We do not have any meal that we typically would have, but we're going to serve up a number of historic entries that we think deserve recognition because they are the best that were submitted to the society according to the judges. And we'll talk a little bit more about how every entry was judged in just a few moments. But for the time being, sit back in your seats and relax. If you happen to fall off, just join us again. If one of us goes away, we have a tendency, because we're just that persistent, we'll come back somehow. I promise. So we hope everyone can hear and hope everyone's going to be able to see those people who are being honored today. I would like to begin after by doing a Pledge of Allegiance, but I'd like to do something a little different today, if it's okay with you. Generally speaking, we all stand up and we do the Pledge of Allegiance. But what I'd like for you to do is, in your own mind and heart, I want you to silently repeat the Pledge of Allegiance as you see the flag that will be coming up on the screen. But also take a moment to pause and think about those people who have made the ultimate sacrifice and given their lives to preserve the freedoms that we enjoy this day and time. And we're going to do that in a very tangible way in just a moment, but silently remember those. Some of them may have been your family members. But I'd like for you to use this as a moment of silence. First, to repeat to yourself in your own head and heart the Pledge of Allegiance as you see fit, and then for just a moment to consider those whose lives were sacrificed so that we could enjoy the freedoms to be on a Zoom meeting today. Thank you.
Another tradition that we have that we do every year is to do something to honor the veterans, not only those who lost their lives in service, but those who came home. Many of them came home different people, some physically different, some emotionally different, all of them different in the depth in which they appreciate what our country means and have seen the worst in fighting that most of us have never seen because of them. Every year, our President Emeritus Elizabeth Sherrill has done a poem honoring the veterans. And today among us are three veterans that we would like to honor or mention today. Ed Curtis was a veteran of the Navy. George McIntosh, a veteran of the Army. And Keith Parker, a veteran of the Navy, a Navy frogman, in fact. They would have interesting stories to tell if we could have them tell them. Maybe someday we will when we're together and can have dinner or have lunch together with them. This year's poem from Elizabeth Sherrill captures some of the turmoil and the frustration and the anger and the different emotions that have been seen in our streets here at home as well as in countries abroad. And her poem captures that emotional feeling, I think. As I read it, you'll see what I mean. But it's meant to honor our veterans who, no matter what's going on all around us, they remember the truth of what it means to be an American. They can tear down our statues, our monuments and plaques. They can burn down memorials, but they never look back. They've never experienced the blood, sweat, and tears shed by many veterans and patriots over hundreds of years. They can stomp on our flag, set fire to it too, curse this wonderful country until they're blue, but they will never be able to kill the American spirit, nor take away the love we have for the citizens in it. They can silence free speech and lie to our nation. Bad is not good, it's an abomination. Veterans, please understand your efforts are not ignored. As God's in his heaven, shaking his head at so many, he's proud of your efforts to protect us from the enemy. Whether the enemy is domestic or an overseas threat, veterans rise to the call. They have no regret. They remember the oath they made to this land when they put their hand on the Bible and raised their right hand. They will always be soldiers, though not still in service. The pledge that they made lasts through any injustice. When the nation's in trouble, we have a safety net. We can always rely on the American vet. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service, those of you with us today, and those we remembered when we were doing the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And now, without further ado, we move to the reason we are here today, primarily to celebrate those of you who have done some amazing things to preserve North Carolina history. And our first award today is a very special one that came as a surprise to us in a way, because we were looking for a new icon. And Larry had an idea, and as he followed through on it, he found someone amazing to help us make our thoughts into reality. Larry, would you tell them about our new icon?
Unfortunately, the artist can't be with us today, and I hope that she could. Taylor Lane is 21 years old. What is amazing about Taylor Lane is that she not only is an artist of note, so very young, she also has to overcome some developmental exceptionalities of her own. But I really discovered her art through my family. My older daughter actually has been dating for a while her father, and so I learned of Taylor, and I had this penchant for wanting to discover young artists and show their work. But the thing that's so amazing about her is that, and you see on this particular illustration on the screen, that the amount of detail that she puts into it. It is absolutely amazing if you take a look at it. Now, Taylor has never been trained. She is not, she really is mostly a primitive artist. She's done everything on her own. She's taken a couple art classes, but never formally been trained or taught to do any of the things that she does very naturally, which in my estimation is just absolutely awe-inspiring as I look at this particular work. Now we have about 7 lighthouses that dot the shoreline from the Outer Banks all the way down to the Brunswick Islands. And the first one that if you're going north to south, the first one that you'd see would be Currituck Island, or Currituck Beach, I should say. That lighthouse was established in 1875. And then if you continue, you come to Body Island Lighthouse. A lot of people pronounce that Bodie, but it's actually Body Island. And that particular lighthouse at Body Island, there've been actually three on the property, and the third one is the one that you actually see in illustration form that Taylor copied uh, for us, as you can see it. If you go on down the coastline, you come to Hatteras, which happens to be the tallest lighthouse in the United States of America, all the way to Ocracoke Island, was established in 1823, and then continuing on down. By the way, uh, for those of you who do not know, that's North Carolina's oldest operational lighthouse, continues to be operated. Cape Lookout is next. You can only get there by a private boat or ferry, but it is recognizable because its design is in a diamond shape, black and white, the only one of its kind on the coastline. Continuing south, probably the youngster of the crowd is one that was 1958 on Oak Island, that lighthouse. And then the old Baldy lighthouse was established in 1817, and that's number 7 on the list. But this is a rendition of Body Island that she copied from a photo that she found online. And we are delighted to offer this as uh, something of our own logo, at least going forward. You will find it, by the way, when you get your certificates. It will be on your certificates in some form or other, as you will see it. And we're very grateful for Taylor, and very delighted to award her this an outstanding award for her contribution to North Carolina Society of Historians.
Mhm. Thank you, Larry. The lighthouse has a lot of different meanings, and when we think of it in connection with the North Carolina Society of Historians, we actually think of you people as being somewhat beacons, guiding lights, inspiration for forward thinking, and cautionary in letting us know if our history is not teaching us what it should. In many ways, you are the guardians of our historic coastline. And so as we play around with the idea of what the lighthouse means, we see it as something that will apply to you as well. So moving now to our special guests for today. Our first award, these are being given in alphabetical order today, by the way. And so Richard Bailey is our first to be recognized. I don't mean Richard, it's Lloyd
Richard.
Richard Bailey. I get the whole name right in a minute. Lloyd Richard Bailey Sr. is our first awardee today, and he represented his entry with 3 magnificent volumes out of a set of 15 that I understand have been finished. And they're beautifully bound. They're as heavy as they can be. I don't think we could carry the whole 15 volume set around. It does look like a set of encyclopedias on the shelf. But in this volume is an amazing representation of one man's life work to capture the history, the heritage, the culture, the scenic sites, anything and everything you'd ever want to know about the Toe River Valley is in these volumes. The young man who started these volumes many, many years ago is still at it today. And the judges who looked at these simply cannot say enough about the detail, the variety of information in here. It is a treasure trove, a wealth for future generations, not only historians, but others that just simply like to read a good book. So I'd like to have Brother Bailey join me on screen here so I can share with him something one of the judges said that goes a little above and beyond or different from what you normally find in a judge's review. So Brother Bailey, are you there?
Brother Bailey is here, ready to rock and roll.
I wanted to see you on screen, make sure I was seeing where you are. Brother Bailey, the judges could not say enough about the detail, the hours, hundreds and thousands of hours of research that have gone into this. You have spent your lifetime plowing a little piece of ground that if we were looking at a map of North Carolina, would be no bigger than a postage stamp. And if you were looking at the globe, it would barely be a pinprick. And yet you have unearthed, just like an archaeologist, you have dug up so much rich, wonderful history and heritage and put it in this book. And our judges noted that things like the index is marvelous. The collection of things you have put in the book and the organization you've put into it and all that. But one of our judges this year had some comments I thought you might enjoy. The first comment she made was, "Editor has won my heart." And then she talks about admiring the diversity in the book. It's a must-read book, appreciated the hard work that went into compiling the information. But listen to this, it is a refreshing read each time it is revisited. And then finally, the comment I like best, it brought a smile to my face. I think you've captured something in this historic volume that all of us can take a lesson from, Dr. Bailey, and that is, while we're collecting history and we're putting it into reference books or we're writing stories about it, the bottom line is to make the next generation of people love history as much as we do, to be able to sell it, to be able to make it seem interesting and fun. And you have done that. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about how did you decide that you were going to devote your life to the Toe River Valley?
Well, my county is on the border with Tennessee. It's small and unknown, and it's done a poor job in preserving its heritage because the Yankees, God bless them, destroyed the courthouse. Lots of houses burned. And so I decided that unless this was done now, it would never be done. And so I began at age 17 to preserve stuff. And since my retirement, I've been able to put it together, taking about 3 years to each volume.
Well, you've done a great job. The last volume you gave us this year, you sent us number 3 and number 7, I think, and number 15. In some of the later volumes, I noticed you're asking us all to pray for you that you will live long enough to finish this series. How many more books do you see are going to be added to this 15?
I think probably 5 more, but I'm age 84. I will not make it, but I will continue to the end.
You've got to make it. My husband's Aunt Ruby lived till she was 111. She was the oldest living person when she died. That doesn't sound exactly right. Anyway, she was the oldest person in North Carolina before she passed away.
I'll settle for that.
So you can shoot to be Aunt Ruby there. You be Uncle Lloyd and hang in there. You can finish all these books, okay?
Thank you. I'll be an old timer by the time I finish.
Well, you've got a long way to go there. You're not an old timer yet. So hang in there and keep up the good work. It is a fantastic collection and we thank you for it. Larry?
Phyllis Bridges, are you on?
I am. Good afternoon.
How are you?
I am excellent.
Good. Can you see your creation on screen there?
I can.
I hope you can. Phyllis Bridges is receiving today a multimedia award for her work entitled The Forgotten Ones of Oakwood Cemetery, along with a packet of information professionally done, artfully done, actually, that I guess it's really a array of information as I see it, with news articles and other aspects that talk about the particularly focusing, as I believe, Phyllis, in the High Point area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, did an exceptional job in work on creating the materials for the celebration. And Forgotten Ones of Oakwood Cemetery drew high praise, by the way, from all the judges who were able to view it, along with the other material that you submitted. So Phyllis, you're actually receiving 2 awards today, but it is for this multimedia combination that you see on the screen. I'm interested in asking you a question about Oakwood Cemetery, because basically what it does, it seems that it details a lot of information about African Americans who were buried there. Some of them were forgotten. Some of them actually made some significant contributions uh, in their lifetime, and yet it was only through you that probably some of their histories were ever recorded. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, sure. I was doing some research a few years ago, and an older gentleman told me about a cemetery where there were some African Americans buried there. But at that time, I thought I knew where all the cemeteries were in High Point, where there was a large body of African Americans. So
Right.
he told me the name of this particular cemetery, and it didn't ring a bell. So I did a little researching, and I went and found the section that this gentleman was talking about. And when I got there, and of course I didn't even know it existed, but once I got there, I recognized some of the names immediately, and they were names of High Point prominent citizens of High Point from the early, from the mid 1800s on up to the early 1900s, and it
Right.
read like the who's who of Black High Point during that time.
Right. Right.
So it was just something in me that had to dig to find out more about this section I never heard of. And there's one particular marker of Annie Pitts. Annie Pitts
Oh,
was
really?
a former slave. She was she belonged to one of the early founders of High Point, but her marker in particular just stood out to me from all the others. So once I got home, I Googled, found a little bit of information, and then I stumbled across a gold mine. And someone in her family had already been researching her, and they had a
Interesting.
plethora of information and some photos of Annie. So
Interesting.
I got to see what Annie looked like as a young woman and as a older woman. And then I connected with her fourth great grandson who lives in Winston-Salem. And he has been searching the family tree for years. He has all this information on Annie. So it just took off from there. So I just started digging and searching, researching for other people who were buried there. We have Reverend Daniel Brooks, who was very, very prominent. He was a Civil War veteran, a very prominent minister, advocate for early Black education here in High Point. There's a former stagecoach driver buried there and his wife.
Wow.
So there's a lot of important history there. So over the years, I've just gathered this history, and I've in my opinion, nowadays the best way to capture someone's attention is through different mediums, because right now
Right.
people just don't have time to read anymore. So one of the submissions
And
was a
you've done that with your
fan.
collection here. Yeah.
Yes, one of the items that was submitted was a fan that has the names of people who we know are buried there, and we use that fan as a fundraiser.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
Another item that was submitted was a calendar. It was used
Yes.
as a fundraiser, and it had images of some of the people who are buried there and little history trivia from the African American community.
According, yeah.
Could we have the next slide, Tim? It shows what she's talking about now. Yeah.
There it is. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I might add that you're talking about vintage photos, you're talking about the calendar and other information throughout.
Mhm.
Certainly a wonderful 400 years of African American history. And we're delighted to give you this award, and we appreciate the contribution that you've made, not only to our understanding of the African Americans in that particular area, but I having done a book on slavery in Wilkes County, I know the challenges visiting those cemeteries and knowing that people are buried there, but there are no markers. You're trying to figure out dates and things like that. Not easy to do, but you've done an outstanding job, and our congratulations to you. Thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm interested in the name of your art studio, Yalix. Where did you get the name Yalix?
Yalix is
Yalix.
my oldest grandson's middle name.
Ah, so you named it
Uh,
for him. What an honor.
Yes, and
What
it
do you do
means
for it?
strength in the community. So that was
Perfect.
the perfect name to take on for a small business.
Absolutely. Well, good job. We're really proud of
Absolutely.
it. Great.
Thank you.
Wonderfully done.
Our
Yes.
next guest is also something of an art lover. We've seen the art skills of Phyllis in action, but today, Evelyn Coltman called me on the phone, months and months and months ago, back before we had the shutdown with COVID, asking if I thought her collection of, not her collection, but the collection of art that was being compiled by the Historical Preservation Committee of the Bethel Rural Community Organization. They have been doing a project of trying to capture historic buildings or places of significance in their county that either had already disappeared or were going to disappear. Buildings that were threatened with falling down or whatever. And they were capturing these, getting artists to do renderings of these. So it isn't merely collecting photographs. They are having these artistically reproduced. And I was so intrigued. And so I said, by all means, multimedia is made for you. And they, the association submitted, or the organization has submitted a collection of artworks done so far. I hope they will be doing even more. And you see a few of them represented on the page here. There are some photographs they've done, but basically a lot of what they are doing is artwork. And our judges have just been so complimentary, Evelyn, of what you've done, not only in preserving buildings that are either no longer there or may soon be no longer there and of great historic significance, but also the art aspect of this in getting different artists to bring a variety of different mediums and a whole, this could be a museum study in art as well as in history. And that did not go unnoticed by our judges. So tell us a little bit more about this, Evelyn. How long has the committee been at work doing this project, and where do you expect it to go in the future?
Okay, our committee has been in existence since 2005. After the success of Charles Frazier's book and movie about Coal Mountain that brought hundreds and hundreds of people to our little
Coal
community,
Mountain.
because
Mhm.
we are where Coal Mountain is. So then we decided to start collecting history. When we did the Coal Mountain Heritage Tour, we wrote a book each year to go with the tour. Then we've done 5 DVDs, 2 CDs, and the missing component was the art collection. So I think it was 2012 or 13, we decided to commission artists to paint 3 historic sites in the community. And the next year we decided to tap into the public to see if they had historic paintings or drawings, and we came up with 7. We've added to that every year to the point that we have 24. We are commissioning another one this year of the oldest log cabin in Haywood County. And so we've done churches, farms, schools. We've done, let's see, what else here? We've done drawings, paintings, photos, maps, and we've photographed them and made them available for ordering, and we have sold quite a few. They're on they decorate the community center in our dining hall, and we've taken them to art shows. And the most surprising thing that I would have thought that some of the beautiful houses and in churches and so forth would have been our best, most popular ones, the best sellers, but it's actually been a map of Sunburst, which was historic logging village that it ceased to exist in 1925, but apparently the people of the area are still very connected to that history. So I have sold dozens of those. As a matter of fact, I just delivered one this past week. So we will continue the art collection.
Excellent.
That is really excellent, Evelyn. I'm so glad you called. I'm glad we discovered these. I would not have wanted to miss seeing these and hearing the story. And it's making some of us want to come up to visit and just see the territory and see the entire collection that you have. But good job. We're really proud of you, and keep up the good work there. Excellent. Outstanding. This is an amazing little journal here, folks. In our collection for this year, in the class of 2020, there were 2 quotations that just struck me when I saw them connected with one of the works. One is an original, and it's on this journal that's published in Alexander County. Kinfolk is the name of it, but the subtitle is really a hoot. Ancestors. Now think about this. Couldn't live without them. And every time somebody thinks they'd like to get rid of old Uncle Pete or some of their grandkids or something, just remember, we couldn't live without our ancestors. So I love that title. And the lady that she's calling on the phone is the one who originated that title. So I hope we get her and get her connected. This little volume is published on a shoestring. And it doesn't, we always appreciate things that can be funded and that we can do something that's really preservable for a long time. But what they're doing here is collecting stories. They're collecting things from the community around them and publishing them in these journals that they then pass out to the community. And there's some precious things in here. They've included newspaper articles, but most of the articles are written by people in the community and distributed as they come in. So, Christina, are you having any luck?
Yes, I have her on the line.
Hey there, Lynn. How are you today?
Hello.
Hello? Can you hear me, Lynn? Alana?
Yeah, I can hear. I'm getting an echo, but I can hear.
Okay. This is Lana Davidson, folks, and she has been working with this journal. How long have you been working with this journal, Lana?
I took over most of the work on the journal about 4 years ago when our president and co-founder died unexpectedly.
Ah, and how long has the journal been in existence?
Oh, it goes way back, goes back pretty far under a separate name, a different name when it first started.
Okay. It seems like I read somewhere it was about 38 years. So you're just about to be celebrating your 40th anniversary, if that's the case. Lana, I want you to tell these folks something you told me on the phone the other day. We were talking about the journal and your passion for it. And I'd love for you to tell them why you are so willing to devote so many hours and so much time to this little journal from Alexander County. What is your motivation for doing Kinfolk, these ancestors you couldn't live without?
Okay, mostly I lived away from Alexander County for about 26 years due to marriage and employment situations. But when I came back, I wanted to do some recording for my son's sake because his grandmother died when he was 4 years old. So he never had a chance to know his grandmother. And I started out with that, and it grew quickly. And I found out nobody at the reunions were recording things, and I just took it all on myself.
Good.
So I've been working on my ancestry about 35 years, and about 12 of those years have been as a volunteer at the association. because when I came back here, they were preparing to publish you may be familiar with that big black book called the Alexander County Heritage. Every county in the state was asked to make
Mhm.
one.
I am, yes.
Right,
It has a gold seal on the front, and
right.
that inspired me. I wanted to put my family in there, and then it just took off from there.
You told me that you had seen a number of citizens from Alexander County who, even though they came from a small place or a small town, they made some significant contributions to a wider part of the world. And that was also a part of your inspiration.
That's correct. The county still does not have 40,000 people in it. Now, maybe the next census will show a difference, but in working on my family history, I started finding these people, and I'm saying, good grief, why has nobody told about this? We have a lady from Stony Point who served 30 years in the civil service, working last year's in the Pentagon. And then she retired and went to the White House to work for the First Ladies for 29 and a half years.
How about that? How about that? Well, I think you have uncovered something that is a lot about what the North Carolina Society of Historians is about, Lana, and that is looking for all the different ways that people may not even know about, that we have had people make significant contributions to history. You don't have to have had a big title or a big office to have done something significant. And I think you've uncovered that, and you and everyone who works with you on Kinfolk and handing this out to the community and doing it on a shoestring is really admirable. Our hats off to you, and we thank you. And I'm so glad I met you on the phone, and I'm so glad you could be with us today. Give everybody up that way our appreciation, will you? And you take a big portion of it yourself.
And I thank you for being 81 years old or 80 years old, 80. Anyway, you and I are about the same age. I just turned 80 last year. And
Well,
congratulations.
Your organization is 81.
There you go. There you go. Well, you belong to us, and we're just grateful to have you a part of our family. Thank you, Christina.
Mr. John Elston is the editor of the Western North Carolina Magazine. The summer of 2020, Steamboat Dream came out about the mountain lily. It's as you see it depicted there on the slide. And so we are delighted, John, to present to you an award in journalism for this particular piece. It's interesting that when the judges took a look at it, they obviously said that this was an amazing and amusing saga of the mountain lily, and we're very impressed with the fact that there are verses of poetry and songs that sort of bookended the piece itself. And another judge said something about the fact that this is simply a tiny slice of history that would be totally lost except for the diligent work of a person like yourself. Tell us a little bit about the mountain lily.
Thank you very much. As it happens, if I look out the window now, I can see the French Broad River that is swollen a bit from the wet snow of the last day. Mm-hmm. And even at its deepest here, it might be 4 or 5 deep on a wet day. Where we're at. And this is exactly where a harebrained scheme was hatched in the 1880s to float a steamboat from the metropolises of Brevard to Hendersonville to Asheville, which at that point did not yet have rail travel. So the interest in moving people and goods up the river was intense. And one prominent Hendersonville man, S.V. Pickens, decided he would found a steamboat company to run the highest steamboat line in the world, as he advertised it. Mm-hmm. And the boat you're looking at was 90 feet long. It would carry about as many people, about 90. and it had two steam wheels that were powered by engines. It managed to make only the briefest of trips before some of the participants realized that there were bridges spanning the river that might cause an impediment for a boat. And then the severe drought of that in the following summer made its passage very rare. And eventually, to make a fanciful story short, in 1884, a torrential rain sent it into a mud bank where it remained as it was dismantled. And therein lies the story of the mountain lily.
It is a short saga, but a very fascinating one, and we appreciate, actually the state of North Carolina appreciates the fact that you have taken time to preserve its history, and congratulations on the magazine. I do see it periodically, John. Thank you very much for what you do with that as well.
If anybody is not aware of the Western North Carolina Magazine, John's history articles in there are the main attraction for me. They're just beautifully done. And this one captures what I think many of us treasure about the North Carolina Society of Historians. We're often looking for those people and those tiny little stories that would be totally lost forever. Was someone not with a keen eye looking to preserve them. And the hoopla, when you read this story, I wish everybody had a copy to read, because the hoopla of the day they set the mountain lily afloat was just amazing. But poor S.V. Pickens forgot that on the Mississippi, they keep dredging the Mississippi so it'll be deep enough. Thus, Mark Twain having somebody, the call out there on the back, Mark Twain, it's safe to go. And he forgot those little details, but it's a wonderful story, and great to have you here, John.
Thank you so much.
It is indeed.
Great. Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Our co-host for today, Larry Griffin, has been working on a cold case in Burke County that created quite a stir when it happened. Well, it wasn't a cold case then, but the killing of Rhonda Henson shook the Valdez community when it took place. How many years ago, Larry?
On December 23rd, 1981.
1981. Young teenage girl coming home from a party. Later was found dead in her car, shot, and no clues that anybody could detect of who might have done this horrid crime to this girl that seemed to be popular. There didn't seem to be a reason for this that anybody could calculate. A lot of investigation went on, but no conclusions were ever made. And the community was left hanging, wondering about the case of Rhonda Henson. Larry picked up the case. He'd been doing investigative reporting for the Wilkes Record. He's mentioned a couple of things he investigated there. One of them turned into a book at least. And then he took up this case of Rhonda Henson, looking at a cold case that people had forgotten except for Rhonda's family and some close friends, and people who at the time of the investigation had never had a chance to find closure or have anything answered. It was just left hanging there. And so he started probing into it. And I wanted to share something about Larry's probing that was said by our judges. I think they appreciated the articles and everything, but he methodically builds a case, against the suspects that may be there hidden in the clues, and going painstakingly into what evidence was available. Has the feel of a true crime podcast, which is a compliment since those are gripping and tense. He has written this in a way that it does read like a novel, even though every fact of it is true in every report he gives. An interesting piece of investigative reporting of an old murder that deserves recognition. I am looking and I cannot find it. I'll have to look again. I've reshuffled my papers and lost it. But the editor of Larry's paper commended on him, and Larry, I think he shared this with you already, but he considers this the best piece of investigative reporting that he has seen in his 30 years as a newspaper editor. It is detailed, it is heartfelt. Larry seems to have a gift of getting people to really open up to him and share with him things, much of what he has published in these articles and has not been seen before. It's never been in print before. And people have been hungering for more details about this story, which was somewhat glossed over because nothing was ever published about it to amount to much. So Larry, tell us a little bit about your journey and what it's meant to you and what it's meant to some of the people that you've interviewed about the story.
I think, yes, it's, writing about cold cases is not an easy thing. I consider myself more of a historical writer because that's what I do, but cold cases are history. And unfortunately, there are a number of these across the country. I think that Rhonda's story was part of a trilogy that I've done. The first part that I did was on a murder that happened up in Ashe County and Wilkes County, at the nexus of the two counties. Sherry Lyle Hart was pushed off the mountain there some 36 years ago, and I did that first, and actually you can still find those articles at the Wilkes Record. You could also find it online on Facebook entitled Sherry Lyle Hart. You can find them there as well. Second is Rhonda's story. There will be another one after that. But it was amazing to me as I began to look at history, the number of women who were actually killed in the 1980s across the country, whose murder cases still remain unsolved. The 1980s were not kind to young women. And certainly in North Carolina, there were at least 4 in the immediate area. The thing that's unique about this particular series was the fact that the Wilkes Record, of course, is located in Wilkesboro, North Wilkesboro, North Carolina, in Wilkes County. And I talked to the editor at the time, Jerry Langford, about whom I'll be talking in just a few moments, about doing the series on Rhonda Hinson. Burke County, of course, is a county away from Wilkes County, although at one time Burke and Wilkes were butted up against each other until 1840. And when Caldwell, where Gretchen is right now, was carved out of both Wilkes County and Burke County. Well, at any rate, he said, he talked to the editor, or I'm sorry, the publisher, Ken Welburn. We decided to do this saga out of Burke County. And it's amazing the number of people who followed this series in Wilkes County, as well as other places. To date, the case remains officially it's an ongoing case, and it's not really classified as a cold case by law enforcement there in Burke County. And probably I don't think that I'm Burke County law enforcement's most favorite person at this juncture, because I think the thing that's most disheartening with most readers is the fact that this case was, with the exception of about 1 or 2 investigators, pretty haphazardly investigated. And quite frankly, it's a case that would have been fairly easily solved. There are people who said that there's a lot of evidence there that just, circumstantial evidence and nothing could ever be done. Well, the preponderance of evidence that's ever presented in a courtroom is circumstantial in nature, and there's a significant amount of it in this particular case. Again, the majority of people are not even aware of some of the things that I was able to uncover through the documents that I was able to possess through the auspices of a very generous person who shared with me investigative documents that I continue to have in my possession. The real heroes of the story are her mom and dad. Became very close friends with Judy and Bobby Hinson. They're not just the heroes, they're the champions, because for 39 years now, they have continued to try to seek answers, and they pretty much know who shot and killed their daughter. They're just trying to get law enforcement to do something about it. What is interesting about the Facebook page is when I established it, and I told the Hinsons that I was going to do so, because I knew that I had a sense, based on the little bit of history I knew about it, that there are a number of people in the area who had not had the opportunity to really express to the Hinsons the way they felt about the case. And many of Rhonda's friends and associates still lived in the Burke County area. But it's amazing the number of people who reached out to Bobby and Judy Hinson and simply did, and were able to grieve with them right now over the loss of their friend and classmate, that everybody in the area adored. If there's ever anything that could, any descriptor that could be applied to Rhonda Henson, she was the All-American girl. I couldn't find anybody or anything. And by the way, this investigation took me 2 years and 89 articles. And so we're talking, I tried to find somebody who had anything that would, even sound negative about Rhonda, but everybody had the same story. I don't care who I interviewed about Rhonda Henson. The Facebook page, right now, if you look to the lower right-hand corner, it says that we had 2,107 likes, I think, at the time, and 2,179 people who follow this. Right now, both of those totals are over 5,000. We have readers that have contacted me from one coastline to the other, from the Canadian border all the way down to Mexico, and we even have some who follow it in a foreign country.
Larry, is there any way for people who have not read the story, or do you have you've written your last article, I understand, so
Yes, I have.
your series is complete. Are these, is the entire series available for
Yeah,
people to read
It
online?
is not, the best way you can read it right now would either be go to the Facebook page and you can read every article that was posted in addition to some updates along the way. But you can also go to the Wilkes Record, which is a newspaper now, is an international paper completely online. And you can go there. They're usually, most of the articles that I've written over the last several months are listed on the front page, but you can go back to the archives and find everything that I wrote. The very first article happened on March the 27th, 2019. And I filed the last article about 3 weeks ago. So it certainly is all there.
Okay.
And
I found the quote I wanted to share from the judges of this, and also from Jerry, and I think we can close with this. One of the judges, who was very much complimentary of the series, had something you had shared about questions will remain. What is the truth, and will justice occur during the lifetime of those not most affected? And she gave a special thanks to Larry for his dedication, and said she was sure the Henson family was appreciative. And then your editor had this to say, which I thought was very good too, and also commendable, commenting on your efforts. Larry is working to bring resolution to the victim's family and friends, and even if an arrest is never made, those close to Rhonda Henson can rest easy knowing that Larry J. Griffin tried and did his best. And I think that's part of what we're about too with the North Carolina Society of Historians. We don't always find the answers. We don't always get everything right, but we keep searching and looking, and always we've done our best. And we appreciate your good work on this story, Larry. It was one worth doing. And
Yes.
The people involved that you've talked with really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Well,
Okay.
thank you.
You like to sit on front porches in comfortable rocking chairs and just rock back and forth and dream the day away? Most people do if they have a porch. I have a friend who has a very nice French porch and a very nice view from that front porch, and her name is Suzanne Irwin. Suzanne wrote a story. She didn't know I saw it, but I picked up this magazine one day and there it was. And I read this story, and there's something in here that's worth all of us paying attention to. You know, history is more than names and dates and facts. It's a story of people, our ancestors who lived on and worked this land long before we got here. And if we study our ancestors and their lives, we can find how far we've come and how far we need to go. Suzanne's ponderings in this story get to teach us that the heart is a simple, but it's very profound, what we see with our heart as well as what we see with our eyes. Her piece makes us take a seat in one of the comfortable rockers on her front porch and embark with her on a mental journey that evokes not nostalgia, but deeper awareness of our past, a past worthy of pondering for lessons we can learn from it. And I was amazed at the depth of this simple story. Suzanne, are you there?
I'm there, dear. Yes.
Tell us the tragedy of this cabin that we're seeing in this picture.
Well, this is Allegheny County, and the house I'm sitting in right now looks out onto John Woodruff's birthplace. He was superintendent of schools in Allegheny County and was born in that cabin.
Mhm.
And about, I guess it's been 2 years now, they tore it down. John had died, and it was I can't explain to you how sad it was to see that house go.
Mm.
But the poverty that he experienced there with no porch said to me that his mother and the eking out of a living on the land, there was no time to sit on the porch as we would go down to Charleston and you have the veranda and your mint juleps. And so I took the porch from, say, Baltimore, with the stoop, the English coming over, Philadelphia. So I went down like the coast of America, the eastern coast, and finally landed in Charleston. And the plantation, the slave, they had no porch because they had to eke out a living. And I think porches, they're wonderful places, but so many never had a porch. It was just a hard way to live.
Mhm.
And what you see is what I see every day. I see land and I see a creek, but I don't see any more of John's birthplace.
Suzanne, your writing touches the heart in such a beautiful way. I am so excited that you're putting out pieces and we get to read them, because looking at that house, I don't know how many of us would have ever thought about the fact that it doesn't have a porch.
Right.
And yet the fact that it didn't, as you said, represents the hard work, the labor. People didn't have time to sit on
No
porches.
time.
And yet, even in Charleston, that part of the story touched me too, where the plantation houses did have a porch, but there were other houses on
Yeah.
that plantation that had no porch because those folks had no time to sit and rock and sip mint juleps. And yet, the hard work of those early pioneers, that's what made our country. And the hard work of those who labored in the fields and did the work up through our centuries. We're here today because of them. And so you took me on a deep journey with this story, and you did with the judges too. They were most impressed with your writing.
Thank you.
One person said of the pieces they were given to judge, if they were ranking them, yours would be the top one of the 4 that they evaluated. I know the ones they evaluated, and there were some good pieces in there. But you do something different with words, and a lot of us do. History is not just facts and figures and dates presented in some either fictional or non-fictional way, but it's what touches the heart that takes us to places in our thinking that normally we might not go. And sometimes we need a poet like you or someone sensitive to those things to point them out to us so we don't miss that part of our journey. Beautiful work. And we thank you so much for doing the writing and for being here today. I will mention that Suzanne also has been instrumental in helping start an Allegheny Writers Group. And they're doing some wonderful things and spurring people to write by giving them prompts to write for. And it's a lot of fun. And so she's a mover and shaker, folks. And I'm glad you could be here today, Suzanne.
Thank you
so
all.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And let's see, Larry, I think we're back to you.
Yeah, so if you travel toward the center of the state and go a little bit south, you're going to run into Moore County. For those of you who wondering where Moore County is and what it contains, probably the largest city, I guess, in Moore County is Pinehurst, though Carthage, I believe, still remains the county seat there in Moore County. In 1889, there was a fire in the courthouse that destroyed most of the records, or a lot of the records. And our guest today, who won an award for a genealogy book, Mr. Morgan Jackson, families of northern Moore County, has worked diligently and assiduously to put together information about families that normally would be lost. There not a whole lot of, not too many records that remain. And so this research has been painstaking in nature, but it provides information about the Scotch-Irish, the German, as well as Swiss and English and other settlers there in northern Moore County. And Morgan, I believe you're on, aren't you?
I am. Thank you, Larry.
Perfect. Tell us a little bit. The hard thing about doing something like the genealogy book is obviously very important to do, but the hard thing about it is if you had a fire, most of the records are gone. Where do you start looking?
Thank you, Larry. And I appreciate the award of being with you guys today. I'll tell you, I started genealogy researching over 35 years ago. And the most challenging things for those of you, as Larry talked about, is when you live in a county that had a courthouse fire, so much was lost, so much history just disappears overnight. And this project, and this is the second volume, the first volume started in 1746 and went to 1830, which thank you guys for the award last year for that volume. My goal was over time trying to build timelines for my ancestors to figure out what was left, what could we find, whether it be through pension records, through some of the county court minutes that survived, some deeds that people refiled, land grants, as many people know, because they existed in Raleigh and not in the county courthouse, those remained. Those are one of the things that remains consistent. We went through newspaper recordings, family Bibles, letters back and forth from in the 1800s from family members, as well as looking at pensions and abstracts and a number of things, and tried to build a timeline for my own family. And then it got a little haywire over the years, and I started building a timeline for all the families in the area, because those of you who've done genealogical research in a small southern town, you know that we're all double first cousins 3 times removed. There are 6 different ways. And so this was really the attempt by this was, I traveled all these courthouses and libraries and individuals and get data to try to share this with folks so they didn't have to repeat the 35-year search for all these records.
Yes. What having been a part of a genealogy society, I'm certainly aware of the value of something like this, and appreciative of the painstaking research, because sometimes when you start looking, you might be able to find a sentence here or there. Sometimes it's just pure dumb luck. You just stumble upon something as well that helps you put together a piece of the puzzle. And certainly this, Morgan, this is extremely well done. The judges are very complimentary about what you have done, the contribution you've made to the preservation of records that are left with those families. And certainly I know the families have to be very appreciative, and we're delighted to award you an award of distinction from the North Carolina Society of Historians. Glad you're here with us today too, by the way.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. I was born and raised in Burke County, but I haven't lived there forever, so much so that I don't know that anybody really claims me there anymore. But ironically enough, I grew up within probably a mile of an area of Burke County known as Valdez, and actually our mailing address was Valdez, and we're talking about 5 miles from Morganton, which happens to be the county seat of Burke County. Back somewhere around 1960, never mind. I had the opportunity to be part of the very first production of an outdoor drama in an amphitheater called, and the drama is called From This Day Forward. Our co-host Maxine McCall is also in that production and has over the years directed it, because it continues to be enacted every summer there in Valdez. When we started acting, there was nothing there but the amphitheater, and that amphitheater has really morphed into something of a high-tech quality theater compared to what it used to be. But also adjacent to that property now is the Trail of Faith Museum. The Trail of Faith Museum is being awarded a museum award as well as a multimedia award. We could spend the rest of the time that we have this afternoon talking about the Trail of Faith, but it's pretty much a collection of buildings and monuments and marking the milestone of history and heritage of the Waldensians who came to the area from Italy around 1893 to escape not only deprivation, but also religious persecution at the time. And their history is pretty much charted along this trail that you can walk through history about 400, probably, I guess, as I recall, is the oldest extant Protestant group in the world, some 400 years before the Reformation as well. I can't say enough things about the Trail of Faith and surrounding areas, but we do have someone here today who can, and that's Mr. Jimmy Jackman, who I guess, Jim, I know that you were state senator for a while as well as a Burke County commissioner. I'm not sure which role you play right now, but you certainly played a huge role in the Trail of Faith Museum. And tell us a little bit about the museum.
Well, the idea for the Waldensian Trail of Faith Outdoor Museum project originated when Valdez celebrated its 100th birthday in 1993.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of interest at that time in our heritage and history suddenly took root. When research of all kinds started, researching into our evangelistic origin as a people, the president of Southeastern Seminary, who had studied the Waldensians as early Christians for many, many years, actually traced our history back to year 300 AD. He also shared scripture that the apostles more than likely traveled through Italy's Waldensian valleys about 200 years earlier, starting an evangelistic explosion. That ended, or that's, as far as that's concerned, all that history and how enlightening it was to our people again, meant we had to do something with it. So therein came the Waldensian Trail of Faith.
And there's also, in addition to Trail of Faith, the Multimedia Award recognizes the excellence of your guidebook and audio self-guided tour. So people can go through the museum at their own pace, and it is actually a treasure in that particular area. Maxine McCall's had a lot to do with that. Maxine, do you have something you'd like to add?
I think Jim was going to say something else. Jim, did you have another comment?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead.
Yes, when I think you asked for memorable occasions that happened, some of these projects and what have you, but if I may, just let me take you back to show you a miracle.
Good.
I took my two brothers to Italy to learn more about our history. While there, we went to the Church of the Cave, where our people had to hide to worship. A small beam of light was shining down on a rock platform that went into that cave. Stepping up on it, I opened my little Gideon Testament I'd taken with me, and the light fell on where there's no vision, the people perish.
Yeah.
I immediately knew what we had to do in Valdez. Returning to Valdez, I brought 6 or 8 older Waldensians together to discuss the vision with them. Their response immediately was, let's build it. There was a problem. The land site we needed was impossible to purchase. I can remember my first trip to meet Mr. Fred Stroop, who was a grandson of Albert Tron, one of the original settlers of Valdez. And I told him what the vision was and how it would preserve our history and heritage for all the future generations to come, and how God could use it as a witness to everybody that went through it. Many would even find the Lord during that tour. He wasn't interested at all. Said, I'm not selling my property. My grandfather gave me this property. Let's talk about the weather. He went on to tell me that what had happened is he was a small child. A number of people in Valdez had come to his grandfather's home, and they're all sitting around the kitchen table, and his grandfather had his head up between his two hands and a piece of paper at the bottom, which meant he would lose some of his land. He said, I saw the tears falling on it. And he said, I can't sell this land. Well, I didn't know what to do. Went back home, went to bed that night. About 2:30 in the morning, I woke up and the Lord was just hounding on me. You've got to go back. I said, but Lord, he told me he wouldn't sell it. I went again. To make this story even shorter, I went back 5 times with the same story, the same request, getting the same answers. On the 6th time, as he came to the door, he said, Jim Jackman, you've been here 5 times before, and what have I told you? I'm not selling my land. My grandfather gave me this land. This is my inheritance. I'm not selling this land. I'm going to give it to you. So
that's what I was going to ask Jim to tell, and he was already ready to tell it. It's quite a miracle story, and if everybody hasn't been there, you need to go see the Trail of Faith. The engineering of the cave they built is fabulous. The monuments from the old country are replicated in Valdez, stone for stone. They're identical replicas. The buildings, the monuments, it's an incredible feat of engineering. Just the museum itself built from scratch. They even had to build mountains so it would have a look of Italy there on the flat land they bought.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful work, and it stands as an abiding memorial to the faith and the history of an incredible group of people. Congratulations. We're proud of the town, and especially of the Trail of Faith and your work. Thank you.
Your praise goes to all our town and all our citizens.
Moving now to a different arena, we're back to a book that has an incredible title, That Southern Thing, Living, Loving, Laughing, Loathing, and Leaving the South. This is a series of books that Randell Jones is part of helping to produce. There is a publishing event called the Personal Story Publishing Event, and I think this is the 3rd volume in a series of those that they're doing, where he invites, I don't know if they're students in his class or just at random, maybe Lauren can tell us about that a little bit later, but they're given a writing prompt or they've given a topic. In this case, this was the one that they were to think of something in their life's history that would fit that prompt. And the whole point about this is to give budding writers a publishing arena so that someone who maybe has a dream of writing will have an opportunity to be published. And I think it's a really, really noble cause. Our judges, in looking at this book, had an interesting comment, however, that I want to share with you. The book in general had good writing in it, but this one judge says there was an essay in this book that was so good, so original, so well devised that it made the others, that it stood out among all of the others. And the name of the story was All That I Could Say, an extraordinary piece. I would like to read more from her. Could we see the first paragraph of this essay? This is Lauren Summers. She's the girl that this judge is talking about. And Lauren, that's not all the judge had to say. I just couldn't read the whole thing. Could you read this first paragraph? Can you see it?
Yes.
On the screen, please.
The first time was on a field trip at age 12. I was seated on the back of the bus. The memory so clear to me as if it were yesterday, except it wasn't, and yet occurrences such as these happen every day.
Lauren, with those few words, takes us on a, I don't know if I can talk about this or not, takes us on a journey through her life that really lets us get inside her head, inside her heart, inside her skin. It is a most revealing piece. And Lauren, I can't tell you, it is a powerful piece of writing. I hope you keep writing, and I hope you stay as vulnerable and open as you are in this piece. Most of us don't have any idea. We have vague, shadowy ideas of what it means to be of a different color in this society we live in. And we need more understanding about each other in that context. And Lauren takes us on a trip that exposes us to that understanding. And she does it in a beautiful way. She's written in a kind of prose poem. It is almost, I think, it's almost poetic.
Yes.
So tell me, first of all, how were you given the assignment? What was the challenge to do writing for this book in the first place?
It all started when I took a poetry workshop in college. I took a class under this poet named Amelia Phillips in North Carolina. And she had us do an assignment writing a prose piece. And some of the elements of a prose poem is to pull from personal accounts from your life, and obviously tell it in a raw and authentic way, but also with eloquence too. And just from reading some sample prose pieces, I had the idea to write about my experiences growing up in high school, because one of the example poems I read was about a poet and their experience growing up. And I feel like a lot of prose poems have themes such as that with personal accounts. So I decided to write the piece dealing with racism in the South.
Well, you certainly did a good job with it. Do you have any words of wisdom to share with people today about experiences, what we can learn from experiences like this one that you had, where some unkind teenage type to begin with made slurring remarks at you when you were sitting at the back of the bus? And then you met this same person a couple of other times in your life, as I recall from the story, correct?
Yeah, in the story, and it might not be clear to the reader, the first time was a different person than the last two times. The last two times was the same person, but the very first time was just another random person, but all at the same school and in the same community that I was experiencing. And I guess if I had any like words of advice, that's a tough one. I guess just being aware of your history and still centering or reading into your history and reading into your culture and learning to have a pride in who you are and learning to have a pride in your culture. Because I think growing up in the community I lived in, I learned predominantly white history. I never really took any Black history courses when I was in high school and middle school. And so experiencing these moments, these students, it didn't evoke that much out of me as it should have in the moment. And it wasn't until I got to college and I started taking courses on Black history and learning about white supremacy and anti-Blackness and learning to love my Blackness is that I kind of found the power in my story and was able to write about it and to be mad about it, but I was able to make something out of that anger and not just like simmer in it. So I definitely would, say always read into your culture and open yourself up to it, to people experiencing that.
It's interesting that the title of the book is repeated several times, I think after each incident where somebody made a slurring remark at you because of your color. And the tone of the way you would say that changes from the first time to the last time. I tend to read into the last time you made that statement a different sense of power within you, a confidence in you that, why bother to say that? I mean, it isn't reflecting on you, it's reflecting on the person who made the remark. And it's interesting that your words can evoke that kind of emotional response in us, that we get so into what you're saying, that it's almost as if we are you in reading this, and that has great value. And your ability to do that was tremendously amazing in this book. And because of that, we are delighted to honor you with a journalism award for your role in this book. Do you plan to do more writing?
Yes, I am doing more writing. I'm actually submitting another piece of work to Randall Jones's personal story publishing project 2021 book that's coming out. So I'm submitting to that. And I do plan on publishing my own book one day. And I do write poems, and I do journals. So I do try to keep up with writing, and I do plan to publish myself one day.
Good.
You just be sure you include North Carolina in that book somewhere, because we want to see you back here again someday, girl. You're just extremely talented. And what you've done here captures a moment in history. I want to share what one of the judges said about your work, because this applies to the North Carolina Society of Historians. All that I could say, hailing from the North Carolina city, so famous for its contribution to the march for racial equality. Goodness, it's here dark where I'm trying to read this. Is still in the hunt for equal treatment of Blacks socially and politically. And he says, a state that was crucial in the movement of civil rights for Blacks in the United States still has a lot of ground to till. And I think that's kind of where we all find ourselves right now. We made tremendous strides once upon a time. I think we're taking some steps backward, but those steps backwards, if we analyze ourselves as you're asking us to do, I think all of us can move ahead into a brighter future for all of us in this regard. And I think you've played a small part in that just by what you've written in this book. Thank you, Lauren. It's a privilege to have you here today, and we look to see more of you soon.
Indeed so. Indeed so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next book award actually goes to a book, Donald Kincaid, entitled Reflections from Shoeshine Boy to State Senator. And it really deals with the highlights of his life, including around 31 years of service in the North Carolina General Assembly, either in the House of Representatives or in the Senate. And at one time, he was the only Republican in the Senate, as I recall reading something about this. But nonetheless, this particular book is an interesting memoir. And one of the judges said, after I read this book, I felt as if I knew Senator Kincaid. The person who collaborated with him in writing this memoir is Gretchen Griffith. Gretchen, what can you tell us about Donald Kincaid?
Senator Kincaid couldn't be with us today, but he asked me to say thank you for recognizing his book. If you notice the title, Reflections, he is standing at the Senate chamber door, and his face is reflected in there. So we chose that as his title. But from Shoeshine Boy to State Senator, he wanted to emphasize the fact that he came from humble beginnings. And it is possible for people to come from humble beginnings and do service to the state. And that's what his book is about, his service to the state.
Well, the judge is very complimentary, of course, about the quality of the book itself, and certainly called attention to the cover as you've described it for us. Well, be sure to say congratulations.
Sure will.
To him.
Sure will.
Very interesting piece.
Our next entry up has the quotation that I was speaking of. There were two quotations that came across in our entries this year that I could not forget. I just read them once and they stuck with me. This book, Murder in Question, picked up one of those just as an introduction to the support entry that was sent in by Mary Catherine Louder. And Mary, are you there, Mary Catherine?
I am.
Okay, good deal. I loved your choice of this quote for your book, Murderer in Question, from George Bernard Shaw, that said, if you cannot get rid of the family skeleton, you may as well make it dance. I love that. You know, you can't get rid of the family skeleton, you may as well make it dance. Well, I don't know if you made him dance. He got away from us and we never could see if he danced or not, but you certainly tackled an intriguing story. And you have all of us wondering, well, what happens at the end? I think a few years ago, she said she discovered that her great uncle was convicted of to hang for murder. And this was in 1905. It was marking the last scheduled hanging in Jackson County. And while waiting for an appeal, John C. Holden successfully escaped from jail. And the more she learned about the incident, she said, the more I realized that a true story was waiting for posterity. Started researching court records, newspaper articles, letters, interviews that revealed a tale with surprising twists and turns. And the title, Murderer in Question, John C. Holden, refers to whether guilty and to what happened after the escape. Mary, this is a cliffhanger and it remains a cliffhanger. What can you tell us about what you found out in your research?
You're right, it remains a cliffhanger. This is one of these things that, Southerners always keep secrets, what everyone else knows. And this was a family secret. I did not realize this until a few years ago. And when I discovered that people in the county, in Jackson County, were still talking about it, I was intrigued. And I went to every single one of them and that knew anything about it, interviewed them. And there was one thing in common with all the interviews, although generational memories usually have notable differences. One thing in common was they all said he was innocent. And not only that, but they told who did it. So I set out to see, did he do it? And the conclusion is still not sure. We pretty much think he did not, but we will never know, because when he escaped from the Webster jail, he did make it across to the South Carolina line. And I think this is what most of the people in Jackson County remember. Even though the murder was brutal, what they remembered was his escape. And he made it across the South Carolina line, which I suppose in 1905 was like going into another country. And from then on, don't know what happened to him. Some say he was out of the United States. He got on a ship. Some say he got on a train, went to Texas. So not only do we not know if he did it, we do not know what happened to him. So it's like Larry says, you can work and work and work, but sometimes you will never find the answer, even though you think you know what it might be.
Exactly.
Did they ever make any significant conclusion as to who really did the crime?
Yes, his son.
Yeah.
Yes, son. Yes.
Interesting.
And some of them,
the son.
and they would first thing they say, his son did it. That'd be it. Yeah.
I think in your book, I believe you said the son, even at a very young age, was the schizophrenic.
Right.
And this took place when he was about maybe 16 or something.
Correct.
And you know how that swings back and forth. And of course, John was taking the rap, and that much we know. But as far as what happened to him, that still remains. You'll have to see if you find out in another book. Who knows? That would be great. But congratulations.
Congratulations. Yes, absolutely.
You have proved a wonderful point, Mary. Sometimes the greatest history story is right in our own family, right in our own closets. We find the skeletons in there, and there's some great stories there too. Thank you so much. Well earned award. Thank you. Okay, the next one, I believe, the next slide up is Teresa Lowe. Teresa, are you there? Teresa has done an absolutely fabulous job with our hallowed ground, Double Shoals Church, Double Shoals Baptist Church, in doing something that I'm sure is tedious and very difficult to do because cemeteries are not always well marked. Tombstones are haphazard. Sometimes they're not even there. And yet there is a lot of history and heritage in a church. And this is no different from Double Shoals. Actually, the cemetery here predated the church by about 40 years. It turned out it started out as a family cemetery. And then somewhere along the line, her grandparents, I believe, the grandfather passed away and the grandmother decided that traveling so far to go to church was getting to be burdensome, and they needed a church closer to home. And so this essentially started as a family, kind of a family church, and then it grew from there to the church that you see in the picture there. The book is very well researched. The plans for the cemetery, the judges were very complimentary. Some of them had done cemetery searches before, trying to find treasures there that they could remember of their own loved ones. And this one has just a remarkable presence. I've never seen a book quite like this one on the way it displays in the pages, the tombstones, the way they would be lined up in the cemetery. If you open the book and you're in a particular section of the cemetery, you literally can look at the print on the book and match it up with tombstones you would be seeing in the cemetery. If I were in my old Vanna White role, I would open the book and show you what I'm talking about. But it was just a remarkable way to do that. And I'd never seen that done before. So my compliments on a very original way to present that. They also have the plots and everything else, but the valuable part of the book is not only just the cemetery plotting and the copying of what's on the tombstones. I mean, you can read it in the book. The tombstone said this about each person. The entire script is shown on the page, but the history of the church is there. And even to the interesting part about the church having now a memorial wall. From when the church was started, her grandparents were separated. He was buried in a Baptist church cemetery several miles away, and the grandmother helped start this church. But they have a memorial wall at the church that brings back together family members. And so finally her mother and grandfather, her grandmother and grandfather together again. And I found that very, very interesting. So Teresa, tell us, you have really labored on this. It's amazing what you have accomplished. And I'd like you to tell the people a little bit about your passion for this, how you got started in it, and what it's meant to you over the years to work on this, because you published several editions of this book. This one is what, number 4?
4. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Yes, this is the 4th edition, and we did the first one at our church centennial in 1999, and I just keep wanting to update it every so often because it's amazing, totally amazing at the changes that take place between one edition and the other. And my goal is that people will. We invite people to walk through this cemetery, and hopefully if they look at the book, they can walk through the cemetery. They can learn about the cemetery, the church, the people that's buried there, and maybe even find some of their ancestors. And then it's also, I guess, to me, it's a way that I can give back to the church just a little bit of what it's given to me in my life, and to help preserve the story of the church and the cemetery, and of course we added the new prayer garden with the memorial wall and so forth just several years ago since our last edition, and I just hope that this will help keep intact for future generations that things that will get lost if they're not recorded. So.
Well, you have done a beautiful job. This is really a well done book, and the judges commented on that. They also commented on practical things like it has a wonderful index. And for anyone who's doing any kind of geological research or anything like these books that help people record or do genealogical research. The index is so very, very important. You also are echoing, just like Phyllis had and other people we've had today, a quote that I found on something came in the mail to me from the Wounded Warriors Project. But what it said there was the greatest casualty is being forgotten. And I have a real passion for remembering the people who have lived here before us, the ones who built the churches, the ones who tilled the grounds, the ones who started the industries, the people who did all the things that we take for granted. And I just believe everybody's story is worth remembering, whoever they were and how whatever their contribution was, be it big or small. It's just important that we do that. In old times, the most valued person in society was the scop or the scribe or the shaman or the person who remembered the clan stories. And when they would sit around the fire, this person with the valuable memory would recite the stories over and over and over, even before we had print, so that people would not forget. And when you study Viking history or the many things, being remembered was so important to people. And I think you have done that. Those of you who labor in these genealogical things, or the cemetery records and all those things that are mundane chores and very difficult to do and frustrating to do sometimes, you are making a valuable contribution in helping us remember people who lived before us who deserve to be remembered. So thank you very much, Teresa, for your hard work and a well-earned award. Thank you.
Thank you.
As we segue into the remainder of the program, I want to remind everybody that you're making history today, and you will be forever a part of the history of the North Carolina Society of Historian meetings, because we've never done anything like this before, ever. We usually are live in living color someplace, but right today we're doing an award ceremony on Zoom. And some of you never accessed Zoom before, and this is a new experience for you, and certainly it's a new experience for us. But when it goes down in the history book about North Carolina Society of Historians, this day will be marked as an interesting milestone, necessitated by the occurrence, of course, of a pandemic. And we hope that all of you stay well. By the way, did you realize that every one of you will receive a free one-year membership of the North Carolina Society of Historians? And that will be coming with your certificate. So be aware of that fact. Membership is really important, largely because it's one of our funding sources. We are certainly a nonprofit organization. None of us, either the executive director, the role that I play, or chair or president of the board, a role that Maxine plays, or any of the board members are paid or compensated in any way. We have no paid members, all a voluntary organization, but the membership the membership fees go to help us to do things, well, like we're doing today. And we appreciate your joining, and we hope that you will continue. For those of you who've never been a member, you are a member now. We hope that you will renew and consider bringing your family along. Membership information can be found on the website, and you'll also, in short fashion, will be able to pay for any renewals on the website as well. So stay tuned for that eventuality.
And I'd like to interject another bit of information I thought you might be interested in, and that is how our works are judged. We have judges of all different types of people from all different kinds of backgrounds. Some are college professors, some are people who have professions not even related to history or writing or anything else. And then we have some people who are just plain folks that love to read. And so we have a variety of people who judge these books and these entries and all the different categories. The rule of thumb is we have 3 judges for each entry. If there are 2 yeses, the entry is accepted. We love to have unanimous votes by the judges, and we do get many of those too. But if there are 2 yeses and 1 no, we will still accept the book and consider it as worthy of an award. If by chance the opinion of the judges is 2 negatives and 1 positive, in that case, we automatically find 2 more judges And instead of it being 2 votes out of 3, it will be 3 votes out of 5. And we quite often have books salvaged because sometimes a judge, I don't know, may have a particular bias or may not be as expert in a particular field and doesn't recognize the full value of what's happening in a book or a story or whatever. And so we think it's fair to do it that way. So we start out with 3 unanimous or 2 to 1. We'll bring an award, or if there is if there are 2 negative votes and 1 positive vote, then we'll go for the 2 out of 3. So we try to be fair about it, and I think we've certainly got a marvelous class of winners this year. There is one thing we have been lenient about this year, and I want to warn you about this because all the judges have mentioned it. And it's something that we who write and publish are in horror of. And sometimes if it's in the hands of a publisher besides ourselves, we can't do anything about it sometimes. But that's errors, mistakes, typos, errors in grammar. We had a good bit of that this year, and the judges were pretty upset about it, but we were very lenient. We didn't keep that from getting anybody an award this year, but we're going to be having heart-to-heart talks about how tolerant can we be, because when you put something in print, there used to be a rigid standard about that. When I was in college, 2 mistakes, period, in an essay was an automatic failure. And newspapers, magazines used to have professional proofreaders, and they took care of that for us. They did all the proofing and everything. We didn't have to worry about it. But publishers today, I mean, there's so much self-publishing and publishing on the web and different ways. There's no longer a profession of professional proofreaders to do the work for us. And so I'm going to ask you to really find a way to get your book proofread by somebody else. It takes time. You can do it yourself, but the problem is when we have written something ourselves and we try to proofread it, we don't see the mistake. We see what we think we said because we see what we think is supposed to be there. We just don't catch those errors. I used to tell students the only way to proofread a theme is to read it backwards, so you're not caught up in the sense of it and your mind races over the mistakes. And that's a pretty good way. But if you've written a couple of the books that we had this year, it would take you a long time to read that book backwards. But I do encourage you to watch that. My personal grudge right now is a rampant mistake going through the system like wildfire. And I want to know whatever happened to the objective case pronoun. There are so many people saying crazy things like, well, it's just between you and I, or he gave the book to you and I. The misuse of the objective case pronoun, turning it into a subjective case, drives me crazy. And I may be the only person in the world. Unfortunately, you're stuck with an English teacher here as your president. And I am really, really upset about the disregard for the language, I don't know, rules, I guess. Of course, the sad part is the longer we allow things to be said like that, it will become the norm. And it's so strange because you would never say, he gave the book to I. I mean, it sounds like some debutante at a nouveau riche debutante at a sophisticated party in Newport, Rhode Island, trying to impress the well-to-do there by seeming to be so well-educated that I would say something like that. In reality, it's, he gave the book to you and me. And so I'd urge you to take a look at that, get you a good grammar review and look over it, because your work is worthy of the best presentation you can give it. Now, I understand too, because I publish, sometimes the typos aren't ours. Sometimes things happen when books are going to press and somebody else is doing the printing. And we're aware of all that and we're tolerant of all that. But just watch it, the proofreading and getting the errors out of there, because your work represents excellence and your work deserves excellence in its presentation. No more. We'll move right along. Thank you. Who's next up? Oh, George.
I had the opportunity to know the person who was the impetus behind this next piece. Having grown up in Burke County, I have got a few relatives around that when you grow up in a small town, as someone's indicated earlier, you have a tendency to, you got a lot of cousins around. Well, one of my cousins happened to be second cousin, actually a double second cousin, because we were related on both sides of the family. It was a man named Gilbert Deal. Gilbert and his family, Aline and the kids all grew up across the street from me at one time, but sort of, I guess at the end of his life, Gilbert and his family living out toward Rutherford College, as I recall, their home place out there. But at any rate, when Gilbert died, they found a treasure trove of newspaper clippings, some of which you see framed right there, a number of which detailed those that had given their lives in service, and they were found subsequent to Gilbert's death a few years ago. George McIntosh is the person who put this wonderful collection together, and George is with us today, and he and I have a familial connection because he married my third cousin, Linda. That's Gilbert's daughter. George, are you still with us?
Yes, that was the greatest decision I made in my life, to marry your cousin.
Well, I'm glad that's working out well for you.
I'm doing good.
Good.
Yes, I got started in this. I was on I co-chair a veterans committee in Burke County we're raising funds to put a memorial on the old Burke County Historical Courthouse for all the men who paid the ultimate sacrifice. We have several monuments around different places, but none just for those killed in action. And we have World War I is not presented anywhere or memorialized anywhere in the county. So we began this a couple of years ago. Plus I had all these papers and I thought, how do I get these Burke County veterans out? And so I didn't want to put it in a scrapbook. So I came up with the idea to put them in frames. And so we started taking them to festivals when we would set up our booths to raise money. And it's just been so very rewarding to see a young couple with elementary sized children come by and you talk about this is my grandfather, this is my great grandfather, and they're showing their children, this is your great grandfather. And it's been such an emotional ride for me. And I'm emotional today just watching the passion from the other folks that have been ahead of me. But it just grew so big, that much bigger than I ever thought it would. And since that I put this in, this was put in for into the Historical Society for this day, I've doubled the size of this, and at the present time, I'm working on one, letters from the front.
Cool.
And
very cool.
It is so good. But and one of the most life-changing things for me was in 2018, I came across an article that a lady, Gail Jones, she's with the American Legion here in Burke County, in Morganton on Roker Street, and she did an article on two black sailors that died in the Battle of the Philippine Sea. That morning they was battling the Japanese Navy, and the Japs were trying to sink a convoy of American supply ships. Well, at that time, the black men could only be cooks and stewards. They had no other job. And I just felt like it was a story that had to be told, and it will be on the next panel. And you don't have pictures of those yet, but on this morning, rather than being below deck doing their menial jobs, they got the power knocked out on the USS Johnson and the USS Four. And
it's okay, go ahead. And they gave their lives.
that morning, they were steering, actually, many men were steering this ship by hand. They were operating the big guns by hand. And I don't call them black men and white men, but they were Americans.
Mhm.
And this day, they paid a great premium on their freedom.
Yeah.
And they should be recognized for that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your work, George. We appreciate it very, very much. We look forward to other panels
Yes, and I'm getting a
as
lot.
well.
And I'll
A
show you this
remarkable piece
one.
of work to be seen.
This is a 75-year-old letter that a lady gave me this week from her World War II father. And I have them from this size down to this size.
I see, yes.
And this one begins just a little, says, "Dearest darling Helen," and it ends with, "Your loving husband." And I can't tell you how that I feel that people would actually share the innermost thoughts of their families with me. It's been, as a Vietnam veteran, it's been very healing for me.
Been very, very touching, to be certain.
Quite a
We
journey.
appreciate your service, and we certainly appreciate the work that you're doing. And if that was my cousin in the background, tell her I said hello.
Hi, Larry. I love you.
I love you too, Linda.
Thank you.
Okay, good job, George. We can't wait to see the next panels you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Sounds great. Moving on now to another novel. This one is epic in proportion. It is, it's so huge, I had to think, who are we going to give this book to read? It's like looking at a novel of War and Peace. But the judge, who was the lucky judge who got it, was thrilled to read this book, and it tells a great story. Father-daughter team of the Parkers, Keith Parker and his daughter, Leslie Boag, put together. Borhaug, I'm sorry, Borhaug. You got that right, Borhaug. Put together a story of early Transylvania, which ironically became a county the very day that the South seceded from the Union, and also the day the chief character in their story became the sheriff, the first sheriff of the county. And they have put together a marvelous parallel kind of story that has two main characters, the young girl Elizabeth in the story, who is a cousin to the sheriff in the story. And they tell a coming up, growing up story during the Civil War with another more objective view of what all is going on in history. And these two stories parallel and intersect in lots of ways, and it makes for a very interesting read. It reminds me of some of the epic books, like even Moby Dick, where alternating chapters either tell the story going on or they probe into the mysteries of whaling and all the instrumentation you have to do whaling. But it's a wonderful piece. The judges were so impressed with the quality of the research, but the ability to take real people, real events, real stories, and weave them into a book that is a novel. It's fictional in its presentation, and yet the history is solid in it, just like To Stand on Solid Ground. So tell us, Leslie Borhaug and Keith Parker, a little bit about how you came to discover this story and how much fun you had working on it together.
Well, we had a lot of fun, and it all got started really when we did our previous book, Sons of Mercy and Justice. I came across some exciting items about the first sheriff, Sheriff Hamilton, in Transylvania County, about his hiding escaped Union officers during the Civil War, and which matched what my great grandmother, who lived next to me, who had been born during the Civil War, all these stories about Yankee Hollow up Lambs Creek here in Transylvania County. And I said, you know, we've got to deal with this because we were in the Civil War time and the other. And Leslie said, no way, that's too much. We've got to stay with this story. So shifting from that, I really got caught up in remembering having known my 100-year-old great-grandfather, my paternal great-grandfather, who served in the Civil War. And I knew him as a kid. He died when I was 9 years old. But during the research on this book, I was excited to find out something I didn't know about my maternal great-grandfather, who had served in the Union Army. So I had great-grandfathers on opposite sides, which matched most of the families here in Transylvania, Madison, and other counties who were split. One of the fun things about this was, as we went on through the years of work with this, the story began to tell itself as we walked through the rumors, but then chased them down with documentation and things. And the big thing, I think the biggest shock to me, was that I had no way of knowing that how close this story from the Civil War matched the divisions we're facing today. It was not a plan, it just happened that so many of the tensions within the family. And but mostly, I think the thing that I got out of this personally was how this mountain sense of integrity was at the core of people's thinking. How the integrity, being faithful to your family, to your faith, to yourself, really came through. And so every character we worked with here eventually had to find their own solid ground to stand on. So,
and I wanted to say just a few things. He said a lot of it, but listening to everybody's story so far, and they talked about preserving of oral history. You know, I'm very much the fiction writer. I'm the plot driver. I'm the let's make this sure that's interesting, but how is a reader going to be interested in this? My goal is always about how can we make history be relevant to the person who's not the natural historian. I want it to be a good story, and in doing so, we learn something. And what I discovered as we went through all these stories and I was looking how to create the plot, it was amazing, the richness of our oral history. And so I commend everybody who is preserving oral history because it's so rich. And I've always said that real life is more unbelievable than, fiction. Yeah. And so I just also want to say that in 5 years of doing this book, I was frustrated at many times because we weren't done or for whatever reason. But when the timing came and we published it this summer, the timing couldn't have been more perfect because the parallels to today, we both hope that people will find strength, will find what matters, will find what really we can look at to pull us together rather than what divides us.
Beautifully said. That's what struck me about the book as well, the parallels between how things were when the country was so evenly divided during the Civil War. And today we're at a point that parallels that tremendously well. And your book speaks to that in a beautiful, beautiful way. It couldn't be timed better. It's almost as if you had planned it that way, and yet I know you didn't.
Right.
It's just the way. This is another case. If we aren't careful, history will repeat itself. And that's the value of looking at our past so we can see where we need to improve our future before we make the same mistakes that may have been made, in
but
past.
Also, Maxine, also find strength from our ancestors.
Absolutely. The fact the point you made about making the plot interesting so that people want to read it, that is so critical too. And as historians, we get so caught up in just the facts, the figures, the dates, the lists, the charts, or whatever, we forget that element of the story. And you all captured that very well. We get the tensions. There's a war going on inside the sheriff because of his loyalty to what he believes in, which is anti-slavery and even anti-separation from the Union. And yet he's got to support the South. I mean, that's his job. That's where we all are. Our loyalties are split and divided many times. And so finding that battle within ourselves we have to resolve while there's a battle going on in the country made for a very remarkable plot. And then the fact that it caused him to have secrets, and those secrets become an interesting part of the story too, when the young girl is thinking about what these secrets are and so on. So you really managed to do both, make it tell a wonderful story and yet be true to the historical fact and the people you're trying to portray. Excellent job. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for entering it. And we can't wait for the next book. Are we going to have to wait 10 years? I mean, 5 years?
I have too many files to straighten out. We got to clean up first.
I'm also, I write under a pen name, Elby Tillett, and that's really the type of writing I write. So I told Dad I need to write some books in that genre for a little while.
There you go. Well, I know it takes about 5 years to do a good book, so we will look for you again as a team.
Absolutely.
And then meanwhile, Leslie, let's have Tillett's books. Does she ever do history books?
Yeah, well, they're not necessarily historical fiction. There's a different genre, so.
Okay, well, just mention North Carolina and send them on anyway, okay?
All right.
Okay.
I hear you. Thank you so much. Let's see, who's up next, Larry?
Chris Robertson is not a newcomer to the North Carolina Society of Historians. In fact, this is the sixth book, that one we're recognizing today is the sixth book to receive recognitions of excellence from the Society over the years. And this particular one deals with William Johnston, who was a Carolina Railroad king. He lived from 1817 to 1896. He died in 1896, 3 years after the Waldensians actually settled in Valdez that we were referencing earlier. Well-researched book, certainly. And Chris, I think you're on, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, tell us very quickly, tell us a little bit about this William Johnston. What was the impetus, by the way, of you're looking at his life?
Well, I'm a descendant of William Johnston.
Okay.
And so I had heard, I knew that he had been an early mayor of Charlotte and had been involved in Charlotte's early railroads. And I had read some short biographical profiles that had been written. But as I thought about it, I thought, well, you know, his projects covered several states, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. And I thought, you know, now I have access to historical newspapers. And so I can research in a way that previous researchers, you know, could not have. And so I wanted to sort of see what else was out there, you know, regarding William Johnston's story. Just to quickly introduce him, in the early 1840s, he was a young attorney in Charlotte. At that time, the gold rush had passed. Charlotte was losing its population, and it was a village under 1,000 people. They realized that Mecklenburg County was growing a lot of cotton, but they couldn't efficiently get it to market. And they had one railroad, but it was not profitable, the Charlotte and South Carolina Railroad. And so the railroad hired William Johnston to be its full-time president, and he was able to make that profitable. And he was also able to develop a couple other railroads to connect with it, which actually created a hub. Before the Civil War, Charlotte was served by 4 railroads. Only one was state subsidized, the North Carolina Railroad, connecting Charlotte with the northeastern cities. But the 3 privately funded railroads that William Johnston worked with connected it with the ports of Wilmington and Charleston. So suddenly you have this geographically isolated village that had access now to 2 ocean ports. Charlotte was thriving just before the Civil War. During the Civil War, the railroads were heavily damaged. After the Civil War, William Johnston led in their quick rebuilding. Let's see what else. And then he was able to consolidate them after winning several lawsuits to create a major north-south trunk line. At that point, they became the Charlotte, Columbia, and Augusta Railroad. That was the network of railroads joined together. And from 1869 to 1872, that was the fastest route between the northeastern cities and the Deep South. And then finally, Charlotte was joined to Atlanta, and that became a faster route. But that allowed, all of these developments allowed Charlotte to thrive. Once the railroads were consolidated, William Johnston became mayor. He would be elected mayor 4 times. He would oversee the creation of the Meyer Street School, which was the Charlotte's first grade school for African American children at the elementary level. And it became the largest African American elementary school in the state. Also, he developed a kind of a luxury hotel to appeal to railroad leaders and textile leaders, early textile leaders. And one other thing that he did that I found extraordinary was he attended for Mecklenburg County the secession convention. And during that time, he proposed a change to the state constitution, which later was successful. And I didn't realize, but even though North Carolina was religiously diverse, until the Civil War, the state constitution would only allow Protestants to hold public office. So during the secession convention, or shortly afterwards, I'm sorry, they changed it so that anyone who believed in the Old and New Testament would be able to serve in public office, which effectively opened up public office to Catholics. And Charlotte had a small Catholic community. So all of these accomplishments together were, I found any one of them to be extraordinary, but all of them together, I just found remarkable.
He was a busy man across his life, without question. That's the thing that struck me. That's the thing that struck me.
Be involved in all those things.
Yeah, that's the thing that struck me as I looked at that, Chris. It's almost like a whirlwind of everything that he was involved in, and you've captured it very, very well. We congratulate you on doing so. Thank you very much. Glad you're with us today.
I appreciate the recognition. Thank you.
Our next book up is an absolutely fascinating piece that we can all be grateful for. You've heard the legend that the South was the most illiterate place in the world. Some people still think so, that down South we don't have many smarts. And even in the South, if you lived on the other side of the mountain, you were the backwater people and you were the really ignorant people if you lived back there. But we have a young lady who has proved all that to be totally false. It's Beth Schweiger. And she has written a book called The Literate South. And everybody will be happy to know that she has disproved the myth that during the pre-Civil War period and even afterwards, the South was not backward, illiterate, et cetera, which was a famous myth that was told all around. And even some of the Southern people believed it, I think. But she has a fascinating story that proves them wrong. Are you there, Beth?
Yes. Hi.
I want you to tell them how you got into this topic. How did you discover this whole world of the fact that the South was not illiterate?
Well, as usual, Maxine, the work of a historian is often accidental, right? It just happens that you run across a particular document or, and I was in the archive in Richmond, Virginia, at the Virginia Historical Society researching what I thought would be a project on people of middle class people in the antebellum South. And as a consequence of that, I was looking at school teachers for papers of school teachers. And I ran across a remarkable set of documents that had been deposited at the VHS from a family in Carroll County, Virginia. They lived very near present day Galax, if any of you know where that is, the Cooley family. And there were 2 diaries in that collection by the 2 daughters of the Cooley family. And so I started reading these, and the absolutely remarkable thing about these diaries is that they were a record of these young women's reading. And I immediately was just fascinated by the range of things that this family was able to acquire. They live very close to the present day Blue Ridge Parkway in Carroll County, just really between Hillsville and present day Galax. Galax is a newer city and was not founded at that time, but I think even in the early 19th century, the coolies were kind of off the beaten path. As you all know, the beaten paths have changed over the years, but so I was immediately just fascinated by this. And as a consequence of my research, I came across another family, which is probably known to you all in the NCHS, the Spear family of Yadkin County, and ran across the books that Alan Paul Spear, and his wife Janet Barton Spear have published on his family in Yadkin County. And there are actually 3 books altogether that the Spears have published on their family. They have some remarkable family documents. And as a consequence of that, I set up a meeting with Alan, got in contact with Alan, and in the real spirit of what I've been hearing this afternoon and in this gathering, I will say that local historians are some of the most wonderful people. Alan was just the most gracious and hospitable person that I could imagine on this project. I ended up, I was teaching at the University of Arkansas in the history department, and I ended up traveling to Yadkin, to Banner Elk, which is where the Spears live, and I met with them, and Alan was just amazing. And I ended up, I believe, probably 2 more trips to Yadkin County. And there's a lot that I could say about that, but Alan's family had some documents from 2 young women, the same generation as the young women across the state line in Virginia in the 1840s and 50s, who were reading a remarkable array of things that they were acquiring out in at their farm outside of Boonville in Yadkin County. And so I put those 2 families together and thought a great deal about what it meant that these young women in these very rural places before the Civil War were reading. And what it means is, in some ways, what you've suggested, Maxine, that we have overlooked the great amount of reading that was done in the antebellum South. And there's some very good reasons, I think, why we have not seen these readers. First, I would say that we tend to think of reading as a story that is told by education in schools. And this is a story that's come down to us for a long time in US history, that schools make readers. What I'm suggesting in this book, and I will say suggesting, because in spite of what you said, Maxine, very generous, but I don't know if I've actually proven this, but what I'm suggesting is that we need to take seriously that there were many, many readers in the United States, even outside of the South, in rural areas, who learned to read for reasons other than being in school. They learned to read for religious reasons. They learned to read because it was required by the way that they made a living. They learned to read simply because they were interested in reading for whatever reason. And they mainly read things that were at hand. And this is the second point that I would want to make. Not only were Southern readers unschooled readers in this period, because as you all, I'm sure know, public schools were not mandated in places like South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia until after the Civil War. So not only were they unschooled, but the second reason why we have overlooked these people is because the vast majority of what these people were reading, I believe, based on the research that I've done, simply has not survived. And it has not survived because these people were reading ephemera. They were not reading so much bound books as they were reading newspapers, magazines, pamphlets, tracts. And these were things that in many cases, not all, but in many cases, they were actually printed locally by local printers. And these things were not, as I say in the book, they were not created to survive. Just as we use newspapers now to wash our windows or line our bird cages or, you know, whatever it is that we do with these ephemeral forms of paper, the stuff that we get in the mail every day that we don't really care about goes immediately into the trash. And the things that these families were reading, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, they were simply not intended to survive. So they didn't survive. So that's really the larger story that I'm trying to tell through these two sets of sisters, is that readers in the South were unschooled, and readers in the South were also reading, in many cases, objects that simply have not survived. I would add briefly that they were also reading a lot of things that came from Philadelphia or New York. New York was quickly becoming, in this era, the main publishing center of the United States. And there were a lot of magazines and cheaper books that were actually printed in New York. And the people who were producing these were very eager to market them to rural people. And they figured out ways to do that. And those of you who have read old newspapers from the antebellum period, I'm sure, have recognized that oftentimes you will find advertisements, not only for bookstores in cities like Raleigh, but also advertisements that were placed in these local newspapers from publishers in New York or in Philadelphia or in Baltimore. They were marketing these things directly to people in rural areas. And so these young women, the Spears and the Cooleys, they would write away to the publishers in Baltimore or in New York, and they would order these things through the mail. So the fact that the South didn't have a lot of bookstores, the fact that the South in this period, the fact that the South didn't have a lot of schools, did not prevent these people from acquiring things to read. And so I could go on and on, but I will stop there.
Absolutely. Well, you certainly have done us a wonderful service by proving that people in the South could read and did read, and literacy is not necessarily tied to a school building or a college degree or something else that somebody might think we have to have in order to be literate. Wonderful service for this. I will tell you a funny thing. The person who submitted your book and wrote this long treatise, he found one of his relatives listed in your book, and he ended up by saying, "This book deserves a Pulitzer Prize." And very well it might, for somebody in the Deep South that's been called illiterate before. Thank you so much for doing this, Beth, and for joining us all the way from California.
From Seattle.
With us. This is
Seattle.
the beautiful part of Zoom. It's been good to have you here. And
yes, thank you very much. Thank you all. I'm very honored.
Well, we are honored to have you with us and proud of your work. All righty, let's see, where do we go next up?
Miss Ernestine Shade, and getting a book award entitled "With God and My Mother's Prayer, I Have Become What I Am Today." This story, of course, is facilitated by Gretchen Griffith, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Ernestine, you're on. This story is obviously, as one judge described it, I believe, beautiful, uplifting story about a young Black woman who became successful, a successful educator, I might add, at a time when it was difficult to attain such success for a young Black woman. And Ernestine, tell us a little bit about that. And Gretchen, you feel free to join in as well.
Well, I'll begin by saying that I'm 92 years old, and I just feel so blessed to be able to be on Zoom. It's something I didn't know I would ever experience in my life. But yes, it was a success. My father died when I was 11 years old, and my mother moved away from Lenoir because she wanted to send me to college. So for years I was lost between an aunt and a mother who lived in Englewood, New Jersey. But in spite of all of that, I think I owe part of my success for going to Freeman School in Lenoir and to Bennett College in Greensboro, North Carolina. And I would like to just say that I worked in education for 40 years. 5 of those years was in North Carolina and 35 in the Los Angeles Unified School District. Now I had 15 years at the elementary school and 20 years as coordinator with the Child Development Division, a total of 40 years in education. I returned to Lenoir in 2002 to marry my childhood sweetheart, which I had not seen in 60 years, over 60 years. And at his death, I just wasn't myself. And Jessica Spears from hospice told me, says, get yourself together, Ernestine. Why don't you write a book? And that saved me.
There you go.
I met Gretchen. And so from that, for the next 2 years, I got all the materials of when I was born in 1928 by midwife until I finished college. You have anything to add, Gretchen?
No, but it was a good experience working with you.
No, I enjoyed it also. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions?
It obviously is a compelling story, and certainly the judges thought so. And Gretchen, of course, as always, they're very complimentary about your being able to capture the great story that's told in the book. And congratulations to you both, actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And moving now, we're going to go back to our story of churches and how churches have evolved in North Carolina. And June Smith has written a book called The Little Things That You Have Seen Me Do and Heard About, a history of St. David's in the Valley Episcopal Church in Cullowhee. And this is a beautiful piece. June, you've done a wonderful job of doing this book. Some interesting things about it being founded. The church caught my interest because the immigrant from Wales, I think it was, who started this first Episcopal church established in Jackson County, North Carolina, was Daniel David Davies, who longed for a church similar to the one he grew up in Wales. And I have been to that church. I have been to St. David's Church there in Wales, and I appreciate his wanting to replicate it here in North Carolina. And your story of the church and how it came about is really a beautiful piece. And I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about your passion for the church and how you came. And I want you to tell them where your title came from too.
Okay, sure, I can do that. Well, I've been a member of St. David's since I moved to the county in 1968. And so I decided that after 40 years of spiritual nourishment, it was time that I gave something back. And so decided that I would finally employ my degrees in history and write a book of history. And so, yes, Daniel David Davies immigrated to the US from Wales. He was a mining engineer. He had a very devout upbringing. And when he finally settled in Jackson County in the about 1855, there was no Episcopal church here, similar to the Church of England, which at that time in Wales was the Church of England. It's now the Church of Wales, but at any rate, the Anglican tradition. But he joined the Methodist Church, and he was well represented there and did a lot of good there. But he never forgot his upbringing. And so as the Episcopal activity in the western part of the state became more vigorous, and the church in Asheville began to send missionaries to the West, Judge Davies, as he came to be called, he had been a magistrate at one time, and he took on the name Judge and was always called that. He and the priests in Asheville became very good friends. There were no Holiday Inns in the mid 1800s, so anytime the clergy came west, either to preach or to evangelize, they often stayed at the Davies home, which was something like 22 rooms in Cullowhee Valley in the area, and they had named their home Forest Hill. And so it was really like almost like an inn in the region. So eventually, Judge Davies pressed upon the powers that be in the diocese to establish a church in Jackson County, and the bishop agreed, and land was donated, and the church was built. It took a bit of time, of course, usually because of money, which always dictates a lot of things. And it was in 1895 that the church, or 98, that the church was finally consecrated, finished. And so the church did flourish initially. Another family that married into the Davies family, the Thomas Cox, and it was all their children and their grandchildren who were the parishioners. Davies was very interested, as the Episcopal Church was in general, in education. And he was actually the chairman of the first board of trustees of the Cullowhee Normal School that eventually became Western Carolina University. So the church from its very beginning was very integrated and tied to the university. But as time went on, and the culture, events in the culture like the Great Depression and 2 world wars affected the growth of the university, of the college. It definitely affected the growth of the church. And so in 1941, the church actually closed because there were simply not enough people around to keep it going. And then it was deconsecrated, but then in the late 50s, priests in the area realized that it really should be reopened in order to minister to the students, because at that time the university was growing. Okay. And so it was reopened, renovated, a little parish hall added, and sort of stepped into what we think of as the modern times.
So it had a second life then, didn't it?
It had a great second life, and what those of us who have been there a number of years and love the church and love the grace of God as manifested in Cullowhee Valley through St. David's, feel like that we have continued that pioneer spirit of our founder. And we've done a lot of things that we're known for. For example, we were the first church in the diocese to call a woman priest way back in 1981. Doesn't that seem like another lifetime almost?
It does indeed. And your book captures beautifully the story, the history, in a way that readers find it interesting, whether they're members of this congregation or not. It tells a universal story of people who care to plant their faith and keep it going, and sometimes starting out as family churches, and then they minister to the community, and then sometimes they do have a second life, even as yours has. And you've done a beautiful job of telling the story. The Judges, I had wonderful things to say about the way it's written and the way it's organized, and what a resource the book is. And we really thank you for letting us look at it. And we are honored to present you an award for what you've done, June. It's a beautiful story, and we thank you.
Thank you very much.
Leanne Smith is the editor of the North Carolina Folklore Journal. And Leanne, if you're there, I want you to tell people a little bit about this beautiful journal. The judges could not say enough beautiful stuff about it. The articles that are in it are well researched. They are well presented, but one judge was so taken with the artwork that went with one of the pieces. It's not just a scholarly journal, but it has art, the photographs, everything about it is just so appealing. And we really commend you highly for the work that's being done on this. Tell us about your work with the journal. How do you find your stories? How do you recruit the writers for the journal?
Hi, thank you. We accept submissions on a rolling basis, and so anyone could submit work to us. Some are solicited. It depends on if we have a theme, that sometimes we'll publicize that, or if we know people who are working on certain topics that apply to that theme, we'll contact them directly. But there is definitely an open submissions process. And probably because of my background in creative nonfiction, that's where the journal comes from, to have its varied style, where there can be some informal pieces and some that are a lot more scholarly and documented in a formal way.
That gives you a broader readership too, I would imagine, by doing that. Because people who are not looking for as much in-depth as they are just, I need to know some more about that. I'm just curious about that subject. And so somehow you managed to appeal to all levels of readers. People who would fit in all kinds of different categories can find something of interest in the Folklore Journal. Can you tell us how it came to be the Folklore Journal? Is that its main emphasis? Because that's a wonderful focus. North Carolina is so rich in our heritage of folklore. And so do all of your articles pertain to the music, the history, the art, the heritage that we have in North Carolina, or do you have other articles in there of a different genre?
We do try to keep the scope somehow North Carolina related with folk life, which of course is very broad. It's really anything about people's everyday lives. It can be folk life, and so it can be foodways, it can be music, it can be dance, which is what a lot of people think of when they think about North Carolina. But there's also so much more, and of course, new communities of people who are coming to North Carolina. We try to be inclusive of everyone who is a North Carolinian and everything that means in a broad way. And so it can cover a whole lot with food, and sometimes it has a more historical focus. In the issue that you can see here, we did follow kind of a series of articles over a few decades that have been in the journal about the Fool Killer character. And so in that way, it is covering more of what some people think about as folklore in terms of stories that have some kind of fictional theme in them. But back to your question about how it became the Folklore Journal, it's published by the North Carolina Folklore Society, and it began as North Carolina Folklore in approximately 1954. And then took a hiatus and then came back into publication and just passed its 70th birthday.
Wonderful.
It has a long history as that name.
Well, it speaks well for itself, and we are proud to have it as one of our award winners this year. It's a beautiful job. You're doing great work, and we do thank you so much, because the heritage of North Carolina is a part of what we treasure about this state. And your journal does a wonderful job of presenting that and presenting it in depth. And that's great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that, more than we can say.
Thank you. And just one more thing I'd like to mention is that we have a relatively new partnership with the State Library of North Carolina, where all of the back issues are available on the State Library's website. Excellent. Hope you'll take a look, and maybe you'll find something that you would like to look into and follow up on with those historical articles and write something new.
That's great. And if someone wants to know the theme of writing that you're going to be doing, they find that on the website too?
Yes, there may be some transition there. So if you want to email ncfolklorejournal@gmail.com, that may be the easiest way to find out.
You would have a current list. Sounds good. Thank you so much, Leslie. Congratulations, Leanne.
Thank you.
Mhm. Betty, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
I am so glad because I knew you had an appointment at 6 and I had just been hoping I would get to you before you had to leave. Ladies and gentlemen, this lady has written the most intriguing entry. And the minute I saw this cover, I thought, who in the world is Sarah Slater? I never heard of her. And the word mystery catches my eye. And so does the artwork. This picture of the woman in widow's weeds and that background and the riverboat and all that stuff just drew you right into the book from the very beginning. Who came up with the idea for the cover, Betty, first of all? Very intriguing.
No one knows what the woman looked like. And I didn't want to show a face. I wanted to keep that mystery. I had befriended a woman on Facebook who lives, she's Romanian, living in Australia, and she does period costumes. So I wrote her and asked her if she would be willing to make a widow's weeds outfit and model it for my cover. So she has a friend who's a professional photographer. So she talked her friend into doing the photographs. So I used a photograph of her on the cover, and then I think 4 or 5 more scattered throughout the book to help illustrate the various passages. So that's how that came about.
It immediately sets up the mood for the book. I dare say no one else who's watching today has ever heard of Sarah Slater. Interesting story of a woman who was a courier for the Confederacy near the end of the war, and she fell into some bad company. And well, tell them a little bit about the mystery toward the end, especially when she becomes the courier and gets into all that intrigue at the end of the story.
I'll keep it fairly brief, but I became intrigued by this woman and the mystery of what happened to her and the Confederate gold on her final trip to Montreal at the end of the Civil War when Richmond was falling. And there wasn't much about her. The outline of her life was very sketchy. There are all kinds of theories about what happened to her. There's only one other book about her, and it's total fiction. I didn't want mine to be fiction. I wanted it to be a biography. But when you have to rely on slim details, you end up trying to find plausibilities to move the plot from one line to another, if you will.
Right.
So I chose, not like the other book, which is total fiction, not to make it fictional, but to make it as close to what we know about her as I possibly could. And at the end of the book, I tried to put in the biographies of the other pertinent people to the book that she ran into, like John Wilkes Booth, etc., which almost got her in hot water, because at one time, the tribunal or the military tribunal that was looking into the murder of Lincoln was very interested in finding Sarah Slater, but nobody knew what she looked like. They weren't even sure of her name. And quite frankly, I don't think she was involved in it. And I chose not to do more than mention that at the very end of the book when I went into the various biographies and the many discrepancies in the articles that have been published. The most recent article that has probably more validity than others was written by John Stanton with the Surratt Society in, I think it's Maryland. At any rate, that's how I came about doing this research and writing this book. And from the minute I discovered her name and a brief bit about her, I decided at some point I was going to write a book about Sarah Slater. I finished my 8th book in February, went through the various editing processes and the publication requirements. And then I sat down and decided, as a part of dealing with being shut in because of COVID, I would write my Sarah Slater mystery.
Wow.
There you go.
Kept you entertained on those dark days. I'll give you one comment from the judges that I thought was very significant about your writing, Betty. One of the judges commented on the skill with which you made her encounters with John Wilkes Booth and the Surratts and the various historical figures that we know were involved in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. You made that so believable, and we could see how she could be affected by that because everybody around her was in on the plot. She didn't seem to be, but there were all kinds of people she was connected with in this courier business she was doing for the Confederacy up to Montreal. And I love the ending of the book where she's standing there waiting to get on a train or whatever it was, and she has her papers that she's supposed to be carrying to Montreal, and she has the suitcase supposedly full of Confederate gold, and she's not going to Montreal this time. I think she normally would be going to Montreal, and the ending of her part says, "Not this time." And that's where we leave Sarah standing there, and we don't know what happened to her. And you're left wondering, well, where did she go? And where did she go with all that gold that she was supposed to be carrying to Montreal? It's a very intriguing ending, but you made it believable. You did a wonderful job of combining the historical parts that you had and filling in the gaps without doing too much breaching of making up things that we don't know happen for real. It's a really good blend of what we do when we don't know a lot about a character and we're filling in the gaps. But it was well done for your first biographical, you said.
My first biography. The other 8 books are all fiction, 4 historical fictions that all won an award from your society. And I thank you for all 5.
Yes, well, thank you.
Well, we thank you for writing them and for putting the quality in them that speaks of excellence. Thank you so much. And I do love the cover of this book and the story of Sarah. It's a fascinating read. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good thing. Okay, so the next one up will be Jim White. The Oral History Society is as old as prehistoric man because before print, people kept their stories alive by telling them over and over and over. They would gather around the campfire and talk about their history, talk about their culture, talk about whatever they were doing. I am holding in my hands here a notebook that came with this award that has page after page after page of topics. These people agreed to meet. How long did you meet, Jim? Was it weekly or monthly?
We met once a month.
Once a month. And
for
with
4
all
years.
of these topics, I mean, it is incredible. There must be, I didn't count them, but it looks like there could be nearly 100 different topics or more that they covered. Every conceivable thing you could think of about Cove City, from its prehistoric days all the way up to the present and year by year by year. And so tell us a little bit about the meetings that started this, and then Larry's going to talk to you about the book that came out of it. But tell us about the meeting. How did that get started, Jim?
It started
actually, Jim, you may want to also address how the book evolved from those conversations. Yeah.
Okay. The meetings began with Miss Eleanor Hawkins, who was the former librarian for the regional library here in the county. She called me up one night and said they were looking at starting a oral history group to just simply discuss the history of the town, and asked me if I would be interested. And I said yes. I had planned on or had talked about writing a history of Cove City, and I thought that would be a good idea, and maybe I could get some ideas for a history out of it. She said, "Great, I'll make you chairman of the group." And I said, "Well, that's not what I had planned on, but I'd be glad to be part of it." Well, the first meeting, they made me chairman of the group. So I thought, well, if we were going to do that, then we needed something to work with. So I created an outline of what I would consider to be the history of the town. And the outline turned out to be a small outline. And then as we began to talk about the history of the town, we elaborated the outline, and it grew into what you see in the outline that I gave to you. The book came from this outline, and we ended up developing what turned out to be 18 3-inch notebooks full of material.
Wow.
And there also is like 14 CDs of material from the discussions that we developed from the discussions. And we have not even had a chance to tap on those 14 CDs yet. So eventually, hopefully, we'll get to transcribe those 14 CDs and get into those notebooks. And the oral history, there's so much more oral history than what is in the book that I actually wrote and published.
Let's have a look at that. Let's have a look at that book. If you'll put that slide up, Jim, and we'll let Larry go with you into the book. I just understand that you did one book based on all that information, and you've got enough material for several more books. So
yes,
with that, I'll
the book is 400. The book is 400 pages.
It is,
and
huge.
You had to stop somewhere.
Yeah, you did. Judge, one of the judges commented, Jim, that there's enough material left over for volume 2, I think is what.
Definitely.
Yeah, by all means. I want to move away from that for just a moment to talk. You're also getting an award for articles that you did, I think, for the Pamlico News about living with Hurricane Florence in the aftermath when Hurricane Florence came through in September 2018. Tell us a little bit about that before we finish here.
Hurricane Florence was devastating for eastern North Carolina. Yeah. There were 2 years later, there were still 300 houses or families in Pamlico County that had not dealt with or had been dealt with as far as dealing with the devastation of their houses. They had roofs that had not been repaired, rooms that had been drenched from flooding, or water that had seeped through the roofs. They were just dealing with devastation. People had to leave their houses. Some of them were living in their houses still with damaged rooms. And so to call attention to this, I began dealing with interviewing these people who lived in their houses to bring attention to what they were dealing with. Certain organizations began dealing with helping to restore their houses or repair their houses. And so I dealt with some of the restorations. I dealt with some of the houses that had not been touched yet. And so that's began those articles that I think I turned in something like 10 or 12 articles that I wrote on those houses and those people that were dealing with some of the houses had been repaired. Some of the houses had not been repaired yet. And I dealt with the trauma that those people had to deal with.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a story could be told across the nation when hurricanes have come through. You know, certainly not only in Carolina, but also along the coastline in many states, and certainly in Florida. Same issues that tend to happen down there. Basically, the articles brought an awareness of how the workings of the insurance companies and the government agencies, how they work, and more often,
or how they don't work.
Yeah, don't work expeditiously. Congratulations all the way around, Jim. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, extend our congratulations to the folks that were in that oral society too. Good work.
Thank you. I will.
Yep.
And now we're going to talk with Linda Willard. Linda Willard. We started out with Brother Bailey, who spent his life and did a lot of his writing on the Tow River Valley, concentrating on one thing, one area, one people. Linda has been the scribe and has done an incredible job of capturing personality profiles, element profiles, event profiles, things that have to do with the Quaker community in the Jamestown area, near Greensboro, I guess that is. And Linda, are you there?
I'm here, Maxine.
Okay, good. Oh, there you are. You popped up now. Linda, you have really done a prolific amount of writing about the Quaker community there, and what you've done is, I'm sure, invaluable to them in preserving cultural heritage and little biographical sketches of various people in the community. Linda writes for the Jamestown News and the Jamestown Newsletter. And you did a series, I think you turned in this year, about Once We Were Friends. I love that title. If you didn't know that we call Quakers friends, you would think, well, what happened to our friendship? Once we were friends, but what now? But it was a clever title for that series. Linda, how did you get to become the scribe for the Quaker community there around Jamestown?
Well, I've always been a Quaker. When I was a baby, my mother would hold me while she was reading to my older brother. So I think I just absorbed it. And then my minister, our meeting, Jamestown Friends meeting, it's a relatively small meeting. And of course, the actual name, we go by Quakers, but the actual name is the Religious Society of Friends. And I was just, with my articles about Once We Were Friends, I was just playing off of the name of Friends.
Yeah.
And the Quaker history just intrigues me, and anyone that will give me a chance to write about it, I'm on it.
Well, you certainly are. You've done a lot of writing through the years. You are not a newcomer to the North Carolina's history of historians, and we've always enjoyed seeing your work, and you certainly are committed to it and are doing a great job. What do you find most satisfying about doing this?
I just, well, we celebrated our 50th anniversary not long ago, and they were trying to come up with ways to, I guess you'd say, publicize the meeting. And one of the ladies said, well, Linda, you ought to write about it. And I said, well, find me a place to write about it. And she said, well, maybe the Jamestown News, which is just a small local newspaper, because Jamestown is located between High Point and Greensboro. And I said, well, you make the contact and I'll write the article. So she made the contact, and the Jamestown News said, sure, they publish it. So the rest is history.
So it doesn't take much to get a born writer started. Just give us an excuse, and there we are. That's the way it works. Well, you've done a beautiful job, and I wish we had longer to talk about it, but I have an idea we'll be seeing you again next year, because I dare say
I hope so. Phyllis Bridges and I have a project underway.
I dare say you haven't covered the total story of the Quakers yet. So as long as they're there, they've got a wonderful scribe in you, and we applaud your work and congratulate you on the award. Good to have you here again. And I want to say to everybody here that we're at the high point of the program. We have about 5 minutes left to give some very special awards that we normally do. This year we're doing the Lighthouse Awards, and then we have the President's Award, and we have the Historian of the Year. And Larry, I'll let you start off with the Lighthouse Awards. And I think, do you have the list of names for that?
I think you have the list of names, Maxine. I'll let you do that. But basically, the Lighthouse Award is it's not a new award, but it has a new name, and it again bears the moniker of the society. The Lighthouse Award of Excellence, typically given to those historians who've submitted, more than just one entry. Generally speaking, they've done work across the years. They've done significant amount of research reflected in the works that they've submitted to society. Sometimes you do get a work that's so profound that you have to recognize it going above and beyond what you typically find in another historical rendering. And so we have several of those that we want to give this year. Maxine, I think you have the list of names.
I'll just read the list of names, and this is difficult to do because the class of 2020 was exceptional. I'm sure you can see that from the array of conversations we've had today. You all have done a magnificent job. Every year, I think the awards can't get any better, and yet you keep topping yourselves, and new people come on board with like Lauren Summers, our new discovery in writing here, and so many gifted people have never been on here before, and we appreciate that. But this year, we selected 5, I think, for the Lighthouse Awards that seem to really speak to something very special and very unique. The first of this will be Phyllis Bridges and the Unique Modern Art, who did the fantastic job with the 400-year celebration of Black history in the United States, but particularly with emphasis on the High Point. Phyllis, congratulations. That was a beautiful piece of work. And we're glad to give it this special honor because you went above and beyond the norm for that. You did things that we've never seen collection quite that extensive and beautifully done. The second award, yes, absolutely. I don't find everybody on my screen. I only get 3 or 4 people. There you are, Phyllis. I see you now. Absolutely. Congratulations. We were in awe of what you did there. Beautiful, beautiful work. I in particularly loved the fan. I thought the fan was fabulous. The next is to our father-daughter team that did the epic story of the Civil War, To Stand on Solid Ground. Keith and Leslie, it is a beautiful piece of work, and particularly the way it parallels where we are today. It's an exceptional piece. I hope many people buy the book, read the book, and see in it reflections of where we are now and how we can do better to get ourselves back to where we need to be in our relations with one another. And it's just a beautifully done piece. So congratulations to you. It's well deserved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The third Lighthouse Award goes to the Historical Preservation Committee of the Bethel Rural Community Organization. Evelyn, for the collection of art that is preserving places that have disappeared or are disappearing, and to do it in the artistic way that combines the element of preserving art as well as preserving history. And we just are so pleased with your work, and I hope it continues for many years, and that you're able to salvage many more memories of people and places through this art collection and the maps and the other things that you're doing as well. But congratulations, good work.
Thank you so much.
And the fourth one we're giving goes to James White and the Cove City Oral History Society. Because of the uniqueness of going back to the original way we used to tell stories and keep our history. And
Thank you.
That is a wonderful way to keep history alive and to get more material than you even knew you had. So keep writing those books.
Will do.
You've got
See you
enough
next year.
Keep you busy for a long time. Absolutely. Congratulations. The next award actually goes to my co-host, Larry Griffin. Larry, we are proud of your series on the Rhonda Hens' story and the other investigative reporting pieces you've done. Your editor, Jerry, when he's saying you are the most, just a gem of a reporter. He's never seen any investigative reporting any better than what you've done in his whole 30 years of career in the newspaper business, and what you have done for the families that you have done research for. And of course, the Henson family is the last one. But we would love to see something happen as a result of your research. But if nothing more happens than what you've done, as Jerry said, people will know that Larry J. Griffin did his best, and I think you have, and we're really proud of you and proud of your work there. And
thank you.
Well done.
Thank
the last 2 awards are very, very, very special. The next one is the President's Award, and I have the fun of choosing that award. Only this year I couldn't make the choice because I have been so closely involved with the winner that I had to let some other people make that decision. And we looked at the judges' comments for all of the awards, and I'll have to say the judges of The Waldensian Trail of Faith were the most enthusiastic, exhaustive. There are pages and pages of things that they found noteworthy about this project. And so it's my honor, Jim Jackaman, to award to the Trail of Faith and to its president, its founder and president, Jimmy Jackaman, the President's Award for this year. It just represents, I don't want to call it the best of the best, but in essence, the engineering, the everything that went into creating the Trail of Faith is so creative and so unimaginable. It's just almost hard to imagine that even taking place. It is a miraculous story. And so our congratulations to you. And we just applaud what you've done. And I know the Valdez community is very proud of it too. So congratulations,
Yes.
Jim. Well
Thank you
deserved.
so much.
Congratulations, Jim.
All I can say is wow, and may I give a lot of credit to all the folks that's been a part of it. Our main tour group that came through first 25 years ago was Dr. Joel Spencer with his college over at Ambassador in Cleveland County. I think they were the first college group to come through. And since that time, he's brought his group back every year.
How about that?
And
We will have to tell them that the ladies who came over from the Waldensian Valleys when the trail first opened, and they came over as our honored guests, and they were walking through the trail, and one of the ladies said to the other, "Well, their monument's more real than ours." And that was a tribute to the exact minuscule copying of these monuments. It's you have to see it to believe it. It's just a wonderful work of engineering.
We're
And
so
Jimmy,
fortunate. But if I may, Dr. Spencer shared with us, and many of their students shared with us these 25 years, that this was the most profound thing to happen to them in their college career.
Excellent.
Touring the Trail of Faith.
Excellent.
that speaks for the trail in itself, just right there.
Yeah,
Proud of
true
you.
story.
Proud of you, and thank you so much for being here and for taking this honor home with you. And now, friends, we come to the most coveted prize that we give every year, or not prize, but the award, the recognition is the Historian of the Year. And this year, the award is so deserving, and it goes to a fellow who I think he said 17 years old. Anyway, a young man started, maybe it was 27. Anyway, a young man started out to capture a few things about his hometown area, his area of living, the place he loved, which was the Tow River Valley. And he has spent his entire life farming, mining, and I'm using this in a literary sense, but looking for gems and jewels and capturing and keeping treasures that people are going to appreciate for years and years to come. Brother Bailey, are you there? Dr. Lloyd Bailey?
Yes.
Congratulations on your work. It is absolutely stunning. The judges couldn't say enough about it. And of course, we've seen you several times here at the awards when you brought some of those books, and we've always been impressed with them. But the collection has grown so vast, it's like the Encyclopedia Britannica, and you've got to stay here on this planet until you finish it. You cannot go. We just sent word to St. Peter. He is not going to let you in until you finish this entire series. You got that?
I would just as soon be in, thank you. So
Okay, and somewhere along the line you will say enough. I've been honored enough. This is well deserved. We are proud of your work, and you certainly have been faithful at it, and you've had a distinguished career also as a professor, and we just can't thank you enough and honor you enough as our Historian of the Year for the year 2020.
Well done. Well done, Dr.
Memorable
Bailey.
year and all. Yeah, I wish we could all applaud. I look forward to the next time when perhaps we can do this ceremony of celebration all together, and we can have applause and we can have hugs and we can do all the things we normally do. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments. And the next time I will know that when we're scheduling this, we need to give it 3.5 hours instead of 2. But this is my first year at doing this, so what do I know? We'll try to do better at scheduling it next year, but your comments were fabulous. All of you are just really, really stellar examples of what
Thank you
historic
very much.
should
Yes.
be. We're proud of you and thank you so much.
Well, may I say
And-
one last word?
Yes, you may.
Well, my thanks to you and to the entire staff for how well you have done under these unusual circumstances, especially for the first time out. Very impressive, and thank all of you kindly.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey.
Thank you for those kind words. You all have been so wonderful through this year. I mean, everything has been unpredictable and we've just had to go with the flow, and you've gone with us and you've been so kind and gracious. And I thank you and love you. Mwah.